What's good, everybody? It's Wednesday night, and we're going to find out tonight what's haunting with Marilyn Monroe, with a very special guest. First and foremost, the man who has done the research, Mr. Kamran Pasha. Welcome.
Wonderful, Zach. I've been enjoying our sort of monthly paranormal conversations. We'd have done this sort of every 6 months. Now we're doing it kind of monthly, and they've all gone well.
I love the monthly stuff. I think that's the best way to do it, and I want to keep doing it. So, and this is a great topic because it's it's what you're working on and expertise area for you, and it's also within that paranormal world, especially with Marilyn.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about it. She's a very universal figure. It's amazing how she died 62 years ago in a few days. I mean, her anniversary of death is August 5th, and 62 years ago, and here we are. It's as if she's alive today, right? So that's a remarkable human being.
Very true. We also, speaking of remarkable human beings, we have Squeaker Mouse.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
How are
Thanks
you?
for having me on. It's good to hang out with y'all. I'm doing great, hanging out with you guys.
It's great. Always great to have you here. And then last but not least, this is her first time on this show. It is Lovett Ever After.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
I'm so nervous, so I will fall over all my words here, but thank you
What are you
so
nervous
much for
about?
the invite.
What are you nervous about? You're like a celebrity.
Oh, no. Thank you so much. But yeah, I really adore Marilyn Monroe. I had a huge poster of her over my bed and some playing cards, so I'm very excited to talk about her tonight and honor her memory.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be complex. There's going to be a lot of stuff. We're going to talk a lot about, the good she did, but we're going to delve a lot into the dark side, which I think has been suppressed by Hollywood because they don't want to talk about it. I think a lot of fans don't want to deal with it. But I think in exploring a person's humanity, we get to see them for who they are, and then you can really see what they accomplished with all of this other stuff going on.
Amazing.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, here he is. There's Salty, I think.
Yeah.
There. All right. Yeah, Salty. Thanks for coming. It's been great to have you back. It's been way too long.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Great to see everybody.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm fighting with StreamYards. I know that's a rare thing. Cameron, it's excellent to see you, good sir. Squeaker, always an honor. And I don't know if I've ever met you before.
No,
So
first time
Hi.
for everything tonight.
I didn't mean to interrupt your Black Panther party. Let's keep going.
Well, a question. I heard, Salty, that you're a bit of a Marilyn Monroe aficionado as well. You have a lot of knowledge on this. Is that correct?
Well, it's more of like motive, opportunity, and what else was going on in the world when this happened. Because to me, this is like two steps kind of removed, depending on which trajectory you want to be on. Right. Mm-hmm. To me, I've gone back and forth between the CIA, which I still think it kind of is, and then the stuff with Dorothy Kilgallen, which I think there's way too much of a correlation with what happened with that famous female journalist, being a friend. She died, I think it was 2 years later under mysterious circumstances too. I don't know. Again, I'm sorry I walked into this, and if I'm blowing it up,
it's a good way to start because people are in the chat already talking about it, I'm going to present, at least because I'm just going to be presenting my interpretation of certain things and then information that certain psychics and mediums have recently given me, and they address her death with some very surprising information that correlates with stuff they didn't know that I was able to research.
There's so much squirrely stuff. I mean, just so like uncharacteristic things that, how she was found, the way she was found, how they got into where she was found, immediately washing the sheets of where she was found before the police showed up, the contents of her stomach magically disappearing from the morgue. There's a lot here, and it's the 60s, and the Kennedys are involved. So you know what? Like, pick a conspiracy theory. You could be right.
To me, if let's just jump into it. To me, the evidence. For me, I read all of these things, and all of these things are squirrely, and they don't make sense, and it's sinister, right? But to me, the simplest thing is this: the police officer that found her body, Jack Clemens. Police officer, and we're going to get into it because he was a friend of her first husband, Jim Dougherty, who's going to be I'm going to talk a lot about Jim in this thing because most people don't know anything about him. Her first husband, Jim Dougherty, was a police officer, right? And he's been completely erased from history for a lot of reasons. But Jack Clemens was a close friend of Jim Dougherty, fellow policeman, right? And he was the one summoned in, and Jack Clemens said, and I watched him say it in interviews, he said, "Oh, I knew immediately this was a setup." He said, the people that were there, her psychiatrist, housekeeper, a few other people, like, this wasn't a suicide. I knew they were lying to me. He said it was a setup, and he said that publicly, and he said it to his dying day that and he was forced and he wouldn't sign the official LAPD documents that said it was a suicide. He forged his name, and he came on and said they forged my name on it. And this is a serious police officer said this is an obvious murder scene. And he said that to his dying day. The police officer who found her. But we'll get into
and
all
what was Marilyn doing the day that she was taken from us, right?
Exactly.
Was she like sulking, reading Sylvia Plath? She was on a beach shooting a video with I think some of the most beautiful, alluring, happy pictures of her I think I've ever seen. Now, someone is doing that and then is telling people all about their plans. And the psychiatrist who went through her records, because he did recordings with her, a free association, she was looking forward to the future. Yeah, she'd kind of been effed up a little bit, like everybody else in the 60s, especially in high pressure things.
Well,
with
she was effed up a lot more.
She was missing scenes and stuff. But I mean, again, it wasn't the way they told us.
Yeah,
love it. You were trying to get in there.
Let's get Zach. Why don't you guide us? Why don't you tell the audience? Actually, why don't we let Lovett
plain and simple? She was just used as a pawn, and she was all used up for her purpose, and they took her away. And it's just sad. You know, she was naive. She was happy, and she thought she had a promising future and everything, and then they took it away from her. So we really don't know what happened to her.
Well, wasn't her house bugged too? Like, I mean, I'm sure they heard something they didn't like.
Her house was bugged by the FBI. Her house was bugged by private investigators. There were multiple wires. The future people who bought the house found wires. I mean, like wires and wiring. It was like what? I mean, it was everybody. And we'll explain.
I think there was rumors that the Russians had wires in there too.
It's possible because, sadly, during her relationship with Arthur Miller, who I think was the worst of her three husbands, she got involved with actual communist spies, because he was for whatever he claimed, he was a communist. I mean, he was, and just like a lot of American intelligentsia didn't really know what Stalin was doing, so they lived in the idealistic world of communism. So he was a communist, and he unfortunately introduced her to actual people that were spying for Castro and for Khrushchev. And when those people entered her life, suddenly the CIA is watching her. All this is documented, right? And so suddenly now this woman has got the CIA watch listing her because she's hanging out with people that are actual known spies who are feeding stuff back to Khrushchev, and then she's banging the Kennedys. This is not going to end well, right? So,
she's the lady in the red dress. She gets everywhere the access where they need her to go and get the information.
Exactly. So Zach, if you want to a little bit, I want you guys a little bit, because I what's going to be unusual about this is that I'm actually going to talk about the paranormal stuff, because I've got multiple readings from close friends of mine who are very famous psychic mediums who I had do these readings only a few days ago for a professional reason. And separately, I've done zodiac chart analysis of Norma Jean Doherty, her real name, say Marilyn Monroe, and her first husband, Jim Doherty, who's a story that's been suppressed for a lot of reasons, and a relationship of their chart. So, we can, whatever people are interested, we can jump in to psychic stuff, astrology stuff, conspiracy stuff, whatever people want to talk about.
I want to jump to the people in the chat first, and then we'll get back on with the show. And I think we should start from the beginning. And I've been telling people the stuff that you told me about her husband Doherty, and they have never heard of any of this stuff. And that he was a sniper. Apparently, he helped form the SWAT teams in LA. And that idea,
he formed the first SWAT team in history. He was like
not nobody.
He was a Clint Eastwood. He was like an actual hero that saved a lot of people's lives. So yeah.
And we got Dildo here. Roman's here. Glad to see your daughter going home. Glad to see you going home, Roman. Thank you very much for hanging out here with us tonight. We all kind of there's a bunch of health stuff going on with all of us in this community here. So, and Stephanie Janisic, thank you for coming.
Wow.
Great to see you, Stephanie. We've got Squeak, of course. We got Lovett in the chat too. Hi. We have a great chat here all the time. Dildo is always a lot of fun. Cyborg is a handsome woman. Yes, sure. That's right. We'll go with that. That's the girl who fights Gina. She's the other in that intro. Good evening from Jacob Einstein, member. Thank for 6 months. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah. And we've got Sassy. What's up, Sassy? Good to see you. Looking forward to your show coming back next week. Again, she had to take a weekend off. We all took some time off here, I think, a little bit. Anyone else? Cajun, what's up, Cajun? And Cannoli.
I think a lot of us just needed to let everybody take in things like the Acolyte.
You can't
God.
forget Jana.
Just take it like an enema, So,
well, considering that's probably how she was killed with an enema. That's probably how she was killed.
We could get into the
Oh my
esoterica of
gosh,
this because
yeah.
I actually reached out to somebody, let's say in the healthcare field, because I'm in that career path and because I'm an idiot, I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And then they started laughing and they're like, all things are possible. All things are possible, but she probably would have evacuated the amount of fluid that amount of Nebutol would have needed to have been put into her alimentary orifice. Like your body, your body isn't like a waterbed where you could just keep adding, like there's a certain point where things need to go back through the outdoor. And that, unless that's why the maid cleaned up the sheets. But again, that's
we'll get to it. Yeah.
A lot,
Yeah, that makes it sound so romantic.
Well, the maid kept changing her story too, from what I remember. Like she never could get it straight.
Yeah, and the maid, I mean, the maid was lying to the end of her life. I mean, what she said near the end of her life, she did an interview in Europe where she admitted Bobby Kennedy was there, and they wouldn't broadcast it in the United States because she denied Bobby Kennedy was ever there. And then near the end of her life, she did an actual TV interview, and then they wouldn't broadcast it in the US because it's too controversial.
Cameron nails it. And she literally, she's an older woman and she's sitting there. She puts her heads in her hands. She's like, why do I have to keep lying about this? And just let it out,
Her life. I mean,
I think we should do here is sorry there. I didn't mean to talk over you. Love it. We should maybe start from the end almost. Because people are hot on that right now. Then we can move back to the beginning and see how she got there. Does that work okay for you guys?
Sure.
Cool.
I have CIA memos. I have autopsy pictures. I don't know how far you want to go. I have Dorothy Kilgallen, that connection. So you just let me know, dude. You know me. You know what I do, dude. So
I do know.
You just you lead.
She's a Gemini too. That's very important.
Good to see you, Nadia.
That's important too to her personality, because they say that that Marilyn was a totally different kind of personality from Norma Jean. Like the way she acted, and there's like accounts of like she would just turn it on, or she would be mesmerized by herself.
Yeah, well, I believe she had multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder. And not only that, I mean, it's not just that she would act and create a character like an actress does. I actually believe it was another persona because her memories would change. That's why one of the historians have a problem with a lot of what Marilyn Monroe claims in her memoirs or in her statements don't add up to the history that we know. They don't line up because her memories were different.
And it's a terrible thing, but she was in and out of different foster homes as a young girl. Okay. At that time, we all know what happens to any kid that goes into the system. Okay. And I like, let's be real about it. Okay. What happens to a young blonde girl who goes into the foster system and bounces around? Likelihood is very high something terrible happened. And dissociative disorder, like Cameron was talking about, is a maladaptation that will occur in those types of very terrible circumstances. So I think there's validity in that. And then you put into that the kind of drugs that she was on. And yes, it was the 60s and everybody was on everything. Better living through chemistry, amphetamines, barbiturate, all that stuff, right? But I think Cameron is onto something there. And I think that personality or those different aspects of the dissociative maladaptation that she had would come out at maybe the wrong times, and that people that heard what she was saying and thought she was serious, because there's some things you don't joke about. Like, I'm going to tell the press about Cuba, you don't joke about that. And then the CIA finds out about it,
Right.
Yeah. So, there's a good book I would suggest people read that has some very interesting claims, which, it's by a actually very, very well-known police officer who's a whistleblower named Mike Rothmiller, Bombshell. It came out about a couple of years ago during the pandemic. He is a very famous whistleblower from the LAPD. He was part of the organized crime division of the LAPD, and he left it after 10 years after finding the level, essentially the people he was working for were gangsters, right? And so he started doing exposés, and he's done a lot of best-selling books that forced the LAPD to do a lot of cleanups, right? And some years ago, he started saying, while I was in the organized crime division, I found the secret files on Marilyn Monroe that were locked away, and I read them, so I know everything that happened, at least according to the LAPD's intelligence office, right? Which is as effective as the FBI or the CIA. It's LAPD, right? I mean, and so but then he wouldn't talk about it because he said they'll kill me. And finally, he's an old guy now, so he published his book. He said, they might kill me, but I need to put this out there. And he published his findings, and he concluded. Because he claims that part of the challenge is because part of his agreement with some of these people is he would not audio tape them. He just had personal interviews. And so he claims that he had a direct confession from JFK RFK's brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, who was one of the Rat Pack guys who introduced her to these characters, that Peter Lawford personally, just a few days before his death, personally admitted to him being present at her death and what happened. And again, we have his word for it because we have no audio recording of that. And so, but it seems to make sense based not just on his story, but it matches up with what my psychics told me. And we'll get to that. So.
Yeah, and there's also I don't know if it's anecdotal or not, but there was evidence of sand being blown into the pool because, like Cameron just said, RFK came on a helicopter, which wasn't normally there, to land, that blew all of the sand, which would not have gotten into Marilyn Monroe's pool any other way because the winds were not like gales off the Pacific. Living off the Pacific myself, so it's just, God damn, this is just such a crazy mystery. It's such and it's such a shame.
Jana, before you go on and play your clip, this is also Squeaka's clip. So you can, is it okay, Squeaka, if I play this for Jana?
Oh, it's always okay to do it for Jana. I do it for Jana all the time.
And she's going to bed, so good night, Jana.
Enough. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
Gandalf? Not the wandering wizard.
The same.
I just bought that on Blu-ray.
Did you really?
Yeah, the remastered version. And
nice.
And I'm gonna buy one of those cells. I follow Bakshi on Twitter, and I'm gonna buy one of those animation cells because he's not gonna be with us forever. And that was such a pivotal, important movie as a kid of the 70s. So
thanks, Jana.
One of the things I found weird, from just researching the topic, so I'd know some things, is a lot of sources say that Marilyn didn't take pills well. Like, she had trouble swallowing them and gagging them. So how can you take a whole handful of them even with water?
You just hit it. Jack Clemens, the police officer who found the body, said that was his first clue that this was a setup, was there was no vomit. And he had been at multiple overdoses, multiple suicides in the course of his career as a sergeant. And he said the body will automatically vomit up that level of thing. And he said there's no vomit.
It has to purge itself.
Yeah. Right. And so even if she died from it, there would be vomit. There was no vomit. And she was laid out completely straight. He said, you start convulsing, automatically the body nerve reaction to poisoning convulsive. She was laid out perfectly straight on her stomach. He said, this is a badly done cover-up. I've walked into bodies of dead people. This ain't it. Right, of suicide, just eat it. So
she was gone before they came along.
You get a loss of consciousness, and again, I don't know Nebutal. Nebutal was not normally what Marilyn Monroe took. She took Labutrin, I think it is, another downer to help her sleep.
Labutrin.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is it?
My point is that she went a couple days before this and got this other script, and we don't know why. I mean, there's theories why, but the fact that she took that many pills, there's no water glass, if I remember correctly, and please keep me honest, Karen.
Well, there was none when he arrived. That was his other sign. There was no water glass. He went by the bed. He went to the bathroom and the kitchen. There was no water glass visible. And then later, when other officers arrived at the scene in the morning after he filed his initial report, there were photographs of a glass. So obviously they had to oops, we forgot that part. They put it in there when he started asking people, where the hell's the glass? And so they said, oops, we forgot that part. And they put it in for the photos.
Yeah.
You said Wellbutrin, right?
Yes, I think
it's an antidepressant drug.
Low Butrin, not Wellbutrin.
Okay.
Yeah, Wellbutrin is an SSRN, which is new and probably within the last 20-something years. I think it was Low Butrin, which was out in the 60s when there was a lot of those amphetamine type, I think benzos. I don't know. I haven't done chemistry in 30 years, so yeah.
Where was Courtney Love when this happened?
Probably a glint in some hooker's eye. That was her mom, dude. That's where I'm going.
So the other thing that's interesting that was in her system, because again, this is the interesting, that is her the coroner, who was a junior coroner, not very experienced, was assigned to her body, almost as if they didn't want him to catch everything because he didn't have that much experience, right? But he did say this. He's like, well, there was he all the drugs were in her bloodstream, but they weren't in her stomach because Nembutal casts a blue, it causes blue shading on tissue. And, if she had like 200 pills of Nembutal, it would have completely shaded her stomach blue, and there wasn't there. There was no coloring of her stomach suggesting there was any pills in there. And secondly, the other thing that she had in her stomach, and I actually have the actual name of it's called chloral hydrate, which is essentially a roofie, right? And she would use that as a sleeping pill, but you can also use that to roofie people. And that's what Peter Lawford essentially claimed happened, that Kennedy roofied her so that others could get down to business.
Oh, I didn't hear
He wasn't killed. He roofied her to get her out, and then other things could be done.
Yeah, and when someone expires, I'm trying to use YouTube friendly terms. You void urine and you void fecal matter.
Yeah.
So could it have been possible that a lot of it came out? Well, I don't know the metabolism of taking that. Let's say best case scenario was 8 hours, because that's what the housekeeper said. I think it was about 8 hours between when she went to bed and woke up and saw the light was on at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Is that long enough to digest medication? Yes. Okay. What I find interesting, though, is why they maybe didn't look at from a liver enzyme standpoint or a kidney standpoint to test for these things. And yes, they could do that in the 60s. They could, not as quick as we can do now, but they could test for those things. Especially
they just tossed her internal organs. They just tossed her internal organs, so nobody could do it. By the way, that account you just gave that the housekeeper said she woke up at 3 a.m. and the light was still on. That's the second account. The account that she gave Jack Clemens when he arrived at 4:30 a.m. when they called. He arrived at 5 a.m. and the account was that, I found her at midnight. It's like when he's like, well, then why didn't you call us at midnight? Why are you calling us at 4 a.m. in the morning? What were you doing for 4 hours?
Yeah.
And then she changed the story later. And then the police wrote down the second version because the first version doesn't make sense. But Jack's like, what is this nonsense?
To answer your question, Salty, it depends on how they're processed. Some are processed via kidney and some are processed via liver. Either way, she wouldn't have had them in her system long enough for them to be voided, period. Like, they wouldn't have processed
in 8 hours. Again, I don't know how these drugs are metabolized. We're also talking about drugs
potentially the albuterol is processed via kidneys. So potentially that one, because it's kidney process, is a faster process. But even then, like any other kind of like was it barbiturates or something too? I think that they said those are liver processed, and those take a long time. And more to the point, like those sit in your system for anything that's processed by the liver will sit in your system for at least 4 hours minimum. And for her to take that many, it would take a long time for them to get to the point of voiding.
And if she didn't actually take it, if it was actually injected into her bloodstream, injected to her bloodstream or given an enema into essentially her anus, right, pushing it in through the body that way, I'm not sure it would be voided out because it would be a different process, I think.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just, again, this is the mechanics of this, and then the fact there's two sets of stories, like Cameron said, and then people changing thing over time. And yes, I know, that woman, I forget what the maid's name was, but these events I think happened in 1962, if I remember right. And Cameron, correct me on this. I think it was the early to mid 80s when that European television interview happened on Marilyn Monroe, if I'm not misremembering.
With the maid, it was in the 80s. It was whenever before she passed away. Yes.
Okay.
Going back real fast to the barbiturates. I don't care how they were taken. If she had truly had enough time for them to process her skin, especially anything that's processed via liver, would have turned her yellow. I know from
science.
She would have had such liver toxicity that she would have been yellow before they ever got to the point of voiding.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a good chance. I mean, the fact that first of all, she was naked. She never slept naked, according to the maid. You look at her face, the lividity marks, and you could see it. And I have the autopsy photos, Zach, if you want them. I don't know if
I don't think we should put them up. They're very disturbing.
Okay, and that's the only thing I'm saying is if you want them, I got them right here. But yeah, I mean, she was face down.
What's that? Cameron has a bunch of pictures he sent me as well. So
Yeah,
let
but
me
they
know
don't
when
know.
you
observe her live. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a
But
child of the foster care system, there's no way she would have ever slept naked.
No.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, I
But
mean, she
we're
was, I mean,
going
she was a
off
bit of a
of
nudist in her when she was walking around at home, but I don't think she would have slept naked. Yeah.
But we're going off of what the coroner said, but a lot of the lab work and everything went missing. So, I mean, we have no basis of if there was anything in her system to begin with. They
Correct.
could
It's
have
just one
just,
guy's claim.
yeah, they could have just given her a shot in the arm and put her out.
Well, one
We
of the
don't
things we
know.
know that the coroner either missed or lied about is that he claimed that she had no needle puncture marks in her skin. So the idea, because they wanted to shut the idea that she was rammed with a hypodermic, either took it or was murdered by one. And her own doctor said, well, really? Because I gave her a shot the day before and the puncture marks should still be there. I gave her a shot the 24 hours before. And the coroner's like, well, I didn't see it. Well, okay, if you didn't see it, what else did you not see?
Bingo.
Wow. Yeah.
I've got to film.
So I think what Cameron's telling all of us is don't be famous and bang a politician and then start talking about what the politician told you publicly and because you won't have a long lifespan. That's how I'm reading this a little bit.
Josh. Hey, Josh.
So with that,
Copa's here?
Josh.
Okay.
And
But
definitely
we-
don't sing to him. Happy birthday.
Well, certainly not that way, because it certainly was an alert. Because I mean, look, their affair was private, and when she came out and did that, it was really a screw you to Jackie, and it was a screw you to the public. I mean, one of my psychic friends, and I think actually we started getting to a little bit of that, said that it was actually intentional because JFK had broken up with her, and so she decided to embarrass him. Because afterwards, everyone's like, all the rumors that they were having an affair erupted. Like all the rumors that were being hidden in DC erupted. They're like, wow, I mean, that's pretty sexual and sultry. That wasn't normal professional behavior at a and they're like, even JFK was kind of embarrassed. He said, well, I've never been slung to in such an innocent manner. He was kind of embarrassed. And so it's like, it was done to embarrass him, but that's also part of the problem. You don't embarrass the president of the United States, right? And you got to loose lips during, communist war situation. It's just, I mean, she was very much childlike, and so she didn't understand the dangers she was in. She just didn't grasp it. She, like you said, the word naive. Her first husband said that about her. He's why he warned her not to go into Hollywood. He was there when that offer came in, and because he knew she was childlike and that she would not understand the evil of what it was. I mean, he's a police officer. He understood what these people were, right? And she didn't listen to him because for the needs that she has to do that. But that's the problem. She never got over the naivete. She kept getting hurt by people because she kept seeing people as fundamentally good, which is true outside of
being manipulated, not realizing that she felt like she was winning, but she was being manipulated at the same time.
Yeah, she's surrounded by the worst human being. After she left her husband, her first husband, she was surrounded by literally the worst human beings on the face of the earth for the next 16 years of her life. I mean, the more I've read, it's just horrifying. There was not one good person in her life. They're the skeeziest, slimiest people. For the next 16 years, it doesn't get any better. She has not one good human being in her life. We're going to end this way.
I don't know, guys. Like, are you saying that women want to get revenge if they've been spurned?
Never.
I don't know if that's true.
Shakespeare would disagree.
Never.
No, never.
I would never wear a dress
Hello,
and sing
Purple.
happy birthday to somebody.
Who would do that?
Okay.
Well,
so since I know some of the ladies have to leave in about half an hour,
There goes
if I may
my hope
indulge
for my
you,
birthday.
Do it.
if I may indulge you, so I want to get into the
I'll do it
paranormal
for you,
stuff.
Squeaka.
So I want to do some of this paranormal
Yes.
stuff. Let me give some insight what I've been doing, why I'm even doing this topic, right? So as Zach Spinozzi, remember my Patreon, I've been talking about it. So I'm a screenwriter for those who don't know. I'm a filmmaker, writer, director, and I've been working on a film that's really changed my life in many ways because I've been researching it, and now the script is done. It's in my agent's hands. They love it, and God willing, we'll see what happens with it. But the script is called Goodbye Norma Jean, taking from the song, Candle in the Wind. But it's a movie that just focuses purely on her life before she's Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it bookends with her life as Marilyn Monroe, beginning and end, right? But the vast majority of the script is her life before she is a movie star, when she's a normal housewife. Like, that period of her life has been erased by Hollywood. Did any of you see the movie Blonde? Did you see that movie? I didn't like it, but did you see it?
I didn't.
I saw the nude parts of it.
No.
But
I mean, it's a bad movie. It's on Netflix. It's a bad movie. Anna de Armas did a wonderful job in a bad movie, right? And it's a terrible script. But what it is, that movie is, it's a sensationalized movie that she's a complete victim throughout. She has no agency whatsoever. And, but what's interesting is they first act of the movie is her childhood and all the horrible suffering. Her father had abandoned her mother before she was born. Her mother was in a mental institution. She was foster home to foster home, in which case, some cases she was apparently sexually abused, molested in these homes. And then she was in an orphanage against her will, for several years, which really damaged her psychologically. And that was up to the age of 16. So the movie follows all that up to the age of 16. And then it jumps forward to the age of 20, where she's a starlet. And now she's being sexually abused by people at 20th Century Fox, the executive, the producers, whatever. But it's like, what happened between 16 and 20? Why is no one talking about it? It's when she got married to a really good guy named James Dougherty, who was her next door neighbor, who's her high school sweetheart, who ended up becoming a major police officer, who was a history-making police officer. He ended up becoming he was the best shot in LAPD. He ended up founding he came up with a SWAT team idea. The world SWAT teams were based on this guy's things, and he rescued people's lives. He was like a real bona fide hero, right? Yeah. And he married her. He fell in love with her, his girl next door. And it was, they're conservative Catholic family. They liked her and so they're like, son, you want to marry her? He's like, yeah. So it's like a little bit of a, not really arranged for matchmaking kind of thing. She's like a poor girl living in a foster home with no family. And they were next door, and she was about to be sent back to the orphanage because the foster family was moving. And so the foster mother and his mother got together and said, if she goes back to the orphanage at this point, she's probably just going to kill herself. I mean, she was in such bad place. The orphanage was so damaging to her. Now she's 16, and going to the orphanage, she would probably either slit her wrists, or she would have ended up working as a prostitute on Sunset Boulevard. She would have run away, and that's would have been her outcome, right? And so Jim, who's a little bit of this noble guy, becomes a police officer. He's like, well, I really like her. She's very pretty. She's very intelligent. I think we could. And so he proposes, and they get married, right? And they get married. She's 16. He's 21. In 1942, that wasn't controversial. Strangely, it's controversial today, but it wasn't controversial back then. My grandparents were the same age, right? In that time period. But they get married, and they're like, and he was really the catch. People think like today, many fans don't like talking about him because he's such a normal guy. And like, she married DiMaggio, who's big celebrity. She married Arthur Miller, big celebrity. This guy's a dude. This guy's a normal guy, but he was even in her life, even at that time, he was the catch. He was the high school president, right? The president of student body. He was the head of the football team. He was the guy. He was actor on stage. Right? He was like a really good catch for a girl with no family and no future. This was like, wow, this hands, and he's really good looking. We'll see some of his pictures. He was a really good looking guy. He was like a bit of a movie star, but he's a really sweet guy. And he's like, I like her. I'm going to marry her, and rescue her from this situation. And they were married for 4 years, which is the only period in her life that was stable. And she actually had a loving, good guy, never hit her, never abused her, took care of her, didn't, one of the false narratives that have been created about him because the fans don't like him because he doesn't fit the celebrity image is that he must have tried to stop her career. He didn't. She started becoming a model when he was sent away to World War II. He was in the Merchant Marines, and she became a model while he was there, got discovered and was on cover of magazines. He was proud of it. So all the guys on the ship were like, dude, that's your wife? Like the cover girl that everyone's falling in love with, right? Yeah. And he didn't oppose that. And we're going to get into some of the insidious stuff that happened that made her divorce him.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he was really insidious stuff. Hollywood pushed them apart, and for very insidious reasons, right? He was the only one protecting her from the system. And then he was erased from history. She went on to become Marilyn Monroe, and he was erased. Like, she wouldn't talk about him. And, and like most fans don't know about her. If they know about him, they think, oh, he must have been an abusive jerk like other husbands. He wasn't, right? And it messes up the narrative that's been created, which that Marilyn was always seeking love and never found it. She was a victim of men the whole life. And so, no, she had a really good guy for 4 years that was believed he was going to be with her till he was 80. He got married again and he stayed with his wife for decades, right? He was that solid, normal guy, right? And so he thought he was going to have grandchildren with her. And then their lives diverged because she was discovered in Hollywood. But
well, you got to think about her past has been so tumultuous that maybe she just didn't know what normal was.
I agree.
And it felt so boring.
That's the right word. The only thing she would say in future interviews was that, he wasn't a bad guy. He never hurt me, but I was kind of bored. I'm like, and you're correct. She would say that. And even that was hurtful to him to read it years later. It's like, I tried to be a good husband and you thought I was boring, right? Well, I mean, she ended up dying of real excitement. She, her life was very exciting after that. And it led to her death, right? And so I don't know that, I think what she needed in her life was boredom. Because the first 16 years of her life were incredibly exciting, tumultuous, every day is changing. And the next 16 years of her life are tumultuous, every day is changing. And she's got 4 years where she's just like coming home to a nice guy, having dinner, going out to, beach, going to dances, hunting, going to camping. She needed boredom.
Well, but you're right. But her maladaptions were predicated upon the abuse and the neglect of her childhood, which was unresolved.
Yeah,
so
correct.
when
Yeah, she wouldn't say that
she
to
was
somebody.
in this normal situation, and I'm postulating this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not her fucking therapist, right?
But the ladies will understand female nature, so we're gonna get their perspective.
True. But at the same time, when you're talking about abused children, when they don't heal that core trauma, it really is wired in at the developmental stage.
Yeah.
Between 3 to 6, when that damage occurs, takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of skilled psychiatry. I don't think in the 60s that they were really practicing a lot of that. A lot of that evolved starting in the 70s through the 90s, and their solution in a lot of ways will take a pill. And the problem is that masks symptoms. It doesn't heal the core trauma that drives you to those types of behaviors. So she knew and recognized instinctively these abusive men who were going to use her, and she would get validation for, somatic, her appearance,
Yeah,
So that's my
and
theory.
so let's get the ladies' perspective on this. So, I'm sure you've all had the friend who's dating the good guy that you thought she should be with, and she leaves a good guy for a bad guy. I think we've sometimes been that person that dates the wrong person and leaves a good person to date that wrong person. So maybe get his perspective on her psychology, why this was him. He's a handsome guy, right? This was Jim Doherty. He's a really decent guy. We should throw some more pictures of their marriage and other things as we're talking. But ladies, can you give a perspective on, that was their wedding here in Westwood.
Aw, so sweet.
Beautiful wedding, right?
Just how she said she was bored, and so she had always felt so much strong emotions. So even if it was negative or positive, so when these DiMaggio and all these other men came into her life, it excited her, and
they would slap her around, but it was certainly intense, right?
Yeah, and she was the playful sort. She liked to laugh and be a social butterfly, and she probably felt like she couldn't be that around her husband.
Well, I'm not sure that's fully true. I mean, I think he was. We're going to get into his personality. He wasn't really a boring guy. I think that's been projected back on. I mean, he just. The problem was he wasn't abusive. She doesn't. The only men she'd ever known was abusive men from her father,
and that's it.
She never met a man who didn't abuse her ever until this guy. So she's like, does he love me? I mean, if he's not slapping me around, if he's not cheating on me, is this real? Because she's
he's not Joe DiMaggio either. So there's like you can't compete with that.
It sounds like codependence with an element of sexual abuse worked into it, at a time where again, the people didn't process these things out. They masked them, pharmacologically,
Before we go further, I need I owe Nadia a song. She wants me to sing the happy birthday song for her.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys ready?
No.
There, I was great, wasn't I?
Yes.
And I just gifted 5 memberships to the chat. So if you got a membership, you got some new perks.
So if I may be audacious enough, I'd love to actually tell you why I'm bringing up paranormal stuff today, because we like to do paranormal stuff. So
yeah, let's go.
So I wrote this script, which looks at their lives and, looks at this whole, the script is 80% is their marriage, which nobody knows anything about, which was a complex marriage. I do believe it was a real marriage. The official narrative, it was just a marriage of convenience. She never loved the guy. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's not true.
For 4 years? For 4 years?
She wrote,
well, can I talk about that?
Yes, please.
Because I'm, as someone who grew up in the west side of hell, and has seen this from a first person perspective, she wasn't bored. It's not boredom. And even if she called it that, it's a matter of when you grow up in crazy town, you don't have a purpose. You don't know what your purpose is. And even if something really good happens to you, you're constantly on edge thinking, this isn't right, something's about to happen. There's all of these thoughts going on. And so it wasn't necessarily that she was maybe bored and it wasn't fun enough. It was so normal that it wasn't her normal. And so she had to
Yes.
go seek out people that would take advantage of her. She had to seek out people that would make her into something else, because when you go through a system like this, or you go through foster care and things, you're constantly having to be someone else. And to have someone accept you as who you are, oh, heck no, that's not happening. That's not right. There's some ulterior motive. I've got to leave this before the other shoe drops. And that's probably what happened.
Yes, which is
very
on
true.
point.
The photo you're looking at right now is the photo that changed her life. She was working while her husband is sent away to war. I mean, it's World War II. He didn't have a choice in the matter, right?
Yeah.
He sent away to war. They were together 2.5 years. That's a real solid marriage. They lived together 2.5 years. And then he gets sent away to World War II. And while she's in World War II, his mother-in-law, her mother-in-law, got her a job, in the factory in Van Nuys here and she was making drones, airplane drones. These were the first drones used in war. And so this was a photo taken by an Air Force Army photographer who was looking to he had been sent by Captain Ronald Reagan, who was the head of PR, the actor, the future president, was sent to find pictures of the future, Rosie Riveters that could really inspire the troops, the girls back home. And he randomly took this picture of her working on this. And he was like, there's something about this girl that's different. And he started taking more pictures of her, then started, can I model with you? Can you do some modeling for me on the side? And then he sent those photos to her, to what would become her first modeling agent, Emmeline Snively, who got her into this world. One thing we should understand, Emmeline Snively got her first modeling gigs, made her a famous model, and got her first auditions at Fox, which got her first contract as an actress. And so people view her as wow, she broke open Norma Jean's career. I'm going to call her Norma Jean because that's what she is at this stage in her life. But people don't know this, and I've confirmed this with historians that I physically met, like this USC historian who did the research on this. Emmeline Snively, who ran the Blue Book modeling agency, was also running a call girl operation. She was running a prostitution operation. As you can imagine, models, prostitutes, that's not the first time in history that's happened.
No.
And so she wanted this girl in her call girl operation, but she's married. So that's a problem. And the husband's like this big military guy who's going to beat the shit out of them if they try to bring his wife into that world, right? So she's like, you really need to get rid of this guy. This guy's not good for you. He's going to hold you back. You can marry Cary Grant. You're so beautiful. And so she starts, remember Elton John says they crawled out of the woodwork and started whispering in her brain. That was Emmeline Snively. She starts putting it into her head. Get rid of Jim Dougherty. He's a nothing, because she needs this girl alone to get her into the call girl operation, which she will eventually join after she leaves Jim.
Grooming.
Which is tragic.
Well, he got the divorce notice while he was on the Yangtze River in 46.
Yeah, he was in a boat in China, and he thought she wrote him over 200 love letters. So he thought this was, while he's away, he thought he got a love letter a day from her. He thought that this was the most solid relationship in the world. He knew she was modeling. He was like, I'm proud of you, right back. And then one day, he suddenly, out of nowhere, instead of a love letter, he gets a divorce letter. And he was like, his brain couldn't compute it. He's been getting love letters for every day for a year now. And then suddenly the next package is a divorce letter, which Snively told her to do. And so he's like, what the hell is this, right? And he goes back and he confronts her. He waits. He doesn't sign it. He comes back when he's on shore leave. He goes to confront her. Said, what's happening here? She's like, look, I've been offered a job at Fox, my first ever acting job. And they say that I have to be single to take the role because officially, I mean, it's not in the contract. It's just the official word of Hollywood. You have to be single to be a starlet because 3 reasons. One is the audience, the men have to believe that the beautiful girl on screen, they have a shot at her, right? If they found out she got a husband, well, they're not that interested, right? This is her taking pictures with all of her covers. Like by then she's like 19 years old and she's also the #1 cover model in America while he's away at war, right? So that's one. The audience men need to believe you're single. Number 2, and this is very ugly because she's someone who always wanted a baby. They said, we don't want you leaving your contract to have a baby. Remember people say Marilyn always wanted a child. She had multiple miscarriages, possibly multiple abortions forced on her by the studios, but she never had a child. And that was her greatest loss. Well, the studio told her at the beginning, if you want to be an actress, you can't have a baby, right? Because we can't have you having a baby. That's going to waste our investment. And the third thing, which they didn't say, which is the truth, which is we need you to not have a husband so you can start going to parties with executives and having sex with them, right? We don't have a husband in the picture to mess that up, right? Which is what she would do. The tragedy of it is she's a very, quote unquote innocent. I'm sure she's very damaged from her pride, but she's basically living a normal homemaker's lifestyle in the 40s. And then she leaves Jim. She divorces him. This is one of the most tragic things that's in this book that I mentioned because he read the LAPD file on her. The LAPD had a file on her in 1947 because within 3 months of leaving Jim and only having Snively and the executives from Fox and all these people in her life, who were giving her this bad advice. She went from being this sweet homemaker to she became the most, I'm going to be ugly about this because she became the most infamous blowjob queen of Hollywood. Like all the producers, like, you got to get her. You got to get her. She's the best. Bring her into the office. And that was
Nancy Reagan.
That's also mentioned. Nancy.
She was probably not in Camilla Harris's league.
To me, that's tragic. To me, that's tragic.
Yeah.
Within 3 months, she goes from being sort of this sweet, naive young woman into basically prostituting herself. With very bad people, and and she doesn't get out of that until she achieves some level of fame 7 years later. She later said when she finally in the 50s, in 1952, became famous enough, she said, I'm now famous enough that I don't have to give anybody a blowjob ever again. I mean, she has said that. I mean, so it's horrifying because this is how quickly they fucked with her head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hollywood doesn't seem to have changed a lot.
What was that?
Hollywood doesn't seem to have changed a lot. Sorry.
What were you saying?
Ultimately, she chose that.
Yeah, I mean, she's a human being. I mean, she has her agency, right? She's a human being, and
no,
Jim
but you can get up and walk away at any moment.
Right,
It doesn't matter about a contract.
You can't.
You can't.
When you're given. Well, I mean, maybe
you can walk away from the profession
contract.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But
you can get
as
up
far
and
as,
physically walk away.
Mentally, when you come from that kind of environment and you're given a purpose like that and an identity, like that's it. She can't walk away from that because that's all she has. And because it's like, well, what do I do next? Like, this is it.
Well,
this
you're
is my
right.
identity, so that I can't walk away from it.
And it's a beautiful picture. Look, she was magical, right? I mean, this was her before all of this, right? And you're absolutely right, Suika, because also what happened, so Jim was heartbroken. He thought this was his soulmate life partner that he was going to have grandkids with. And he was very hurt. And because he came out of nowhere, he had no preparation for it. And he said, look, I'll be happy. You can be an actress, but we're husband and wife. You have to talk to me about it. You can't just dump me like this, right? And just tell me you're going to become an actress, right? But she did. And he finally said, fine, I'm not going to force you to be married with me. I love you enough to let you go. And he signed it, let her go. But he was very hurt. And, a few months later, he got married to somebody else that he stayed married to for many more years, had 3 beautiful children with her, right? But he was a little bit of a rebound. He was very, very devastated by this loss. And he's like, look, I'm just going to close this part of my life. I'm just going to get married again. And I think she was pretty hurt that within 6 months, he's married somebody else. And within 6 months, the tragedy is, remember I told you she got that Fox contract? So within 6 months, they drop her. After using her like this, in 6 months, they're like, I guess thanks for the blowjobs, they drop her. And so now suddenly she's out of a contract. Her husband is married to somebody else. She's got no family, no money, no one to help her. And so she suddenly becomes further and further in the world of prostitution in Hollywood because she has no way to pay her rent. I mean, it's a horrific confluence of events.
I will say this about her ex-husband. That was some very emotionally healthy shit to do.
For himself.
It sounds terrible. It sounds terrible. But when somebody does what Marilyn, what any woman as a man, or if you're a woman,
any spouse dumps you like that,
then hit the fucking door. Like, there's the door, and let them walk. And then it sucks. Go through it. But you know what? Go find somebody who has value and values you. You know what I mean? We're not put on this earth to chase after people who don't have time. And you can't, and this is the fucking worst.
You can't wait for someone to come back like that. Yeah.
You can't, and you can't save somebody from themselves.
Yeah.
You cannot. And that's why I hold to my original thesis. As sad as it is, the abuse that she experienced as a child never was resolved. And she unfortunately was manipulated by that woman who got her into prostitution. It's terrible. It's terrible, the emotional manipulation that occurred to this woman.
And the problem is all these people were parental figures to her. She didn't have a mother. Her mother's in a mental institution. Her father won't talk to her. Her father won't even acknowledge her. She called her father. Jim was there when she called her father, finally had the guts to call her father, and he hung up on her. He's like, you're not my daughter. I don't want you to ever call me again. And Jim was there, and she broke down. She had no parents, but all of these scumbags in her life became her parents. Like Emmeline Snively became her mommy. The executives of Fox. One of her lovers at Fox was 70-year-old Joseph Schenck, the chairman of the Fox, right? She's banging this guy who's her great grandpa, right? But he's a daddy figure. So she's always looking for, all these people took on the form of mommy or daddy for her.
Mm-hmm.
So if I may, guys, I actually want to now jump into so what happened is, as I wrote the script, I then have 2 very, very well-respected psychics. One of them, I'm going to read mostly from this one, my friend Cindy Keza. Do any of you ever watch like the Discovery Channel, like haunting shows, right? It's like,
Yeah.
So like she's their most popular psychic, and she's a very close friend of mine, and she is for real a psychic and medium. I've seen her I've seen her do public events where she does, like, this is a lot of her income. She does public events, at like comedy clubs. She goes up and instead of comedy, she does medium readings. And I've seen her with my own eyes go up there and like say, that gentleman in the back, your grandfather has this thing to say about you. The keys that are, the keys you've been looking for are in the back seat. You're like, what the hell is going on there? She's like, I've seen it. It's insane. And so what happened is, so Cindy and I are just friends. We're just talking. And she comes on the phone with me and says, hey, Cameron, I got a weird message from some guy named Jim. I think it's for you. And I was like, Jim, could it be Jim Doherty? Marilyn. Because I'm like looking at this. I was like, Jim. Wow. I was like, she's that. He said he died in his 80s of a heart attack, which is how Jim died in 2005. And I was like, oh my God, you're like, Jim Doherty reached out to you? She's like, who's that? Wow. I'm like, I think that's Marilyn Monroe's husband. She's like, and she doesn't know anything about this, right? She's like, well, I was like, can we do a session? So I hired her to do an actual full psychic session to see if Jim would come through. The funny thing is, Jim came through for about 5 seconds. And then Norma Jean comes in and says, you don't want to talk to him. He's boring. You want to talk to me. She just pushes him aside. So Jim comes in. She's like, well, Jim's here. And he's about to say, and she's like, oh, wait a minute. She's appeared. And she said, Jim, be quiet. They want to talk to me. So let's get, and she starts channeling Marilyn. And what's fascinating, she doesn't know much beyond what a normal person knows. She never knew this guy, Jim Doherty. She didn't know she had a first husband. She didn't know much about Marilyn beyond the very simplistic thing anyone knows, the 7-year itch, the dress blowing up, whatever. So I'm going to just read to you what she gave me, because I wrote it as she was saying it. And it blows me away, because it matches a lot of the things everyone on this panel has been saying and what we historians think, because she didn't know any of it. And I was like, you have no idea. That's all confirmable what you're saying. So this is what she's excited. I'm sorry?
I'm excited.
So let's jump in. I'm just rewriting, because I know you ladies have to leave.
Go.
So I want to hold you much longer, right? So where's my thing? Hold on. Now, I'm so excited. I have so many screens open. I can't find. Here we go. All right. So this was on July 8, 2024. So the first thing, and I'm just going to read what I wrote. So Cindy says, the first thing that Norma Jean, I'm gonna call her Norma Jean because Marilyn to me is a persona, just like the little tramp is a persona, and Charlie Chaplin is the creator of the persona. You don't think of the little tramp as Charlie Chaplin, so we call her Norma Jean. So Norma Jean, the first thing she's telling Cindy is that she's, even now, 62 years later, still has deep grief around her miscarriages. Like, she really wanted to be a mother. That's the first thing she says.
I believe that.
Even now she has not dealt with a trauma of losing those babies, because she had multiple miscarriages, possibly multiple abortions. Cindy was able to confirm at least one, but yes. So she said, and that's the first thing she says, I want you to know that I'm still haunted by that. I wanted to be a mom, and every time I tried to have a baby, they would die, right? And she's haunted. And that leads her into the conversation. She said, so the next thing that Norma Jean would show her is that she's having conversations in her marriage with Jim about having a baby. And this is confirmed by Jim's memoir, that they taught that even before he shipped off to war, that they talked about having a baby, because she was actually desperate. She's like, she thought Jim would die in the war. And as you guys know, she's used to people leaving or dying in her life. So she thought Jim was just going to go and he was going to die. So she was begging him, let me please have a baby. So even if don't come back, I have someone, right? And they tried. They had sex. They didn't have a baby, right? But that was the first. He saw that was very important in a relationship with Jim. She wanted a baby with him. And now this is where it's interesting, which goes against the narrative that fans have created, that this was just a marriage of convenience. She never loved the guy. She forgot about him when she moved on. Even from my research, I know that's not true, because she wrote letters to her foster mother about how much she loved him, like letters that she never knew would become in the public record when she's just a nobody woman. And these were very honest letters from her heart about how deeply she loved him, right? But this is what Cindy says. She says they were truly in love, and now Jim comes through, and Jim says he still doesn't understand why she left him.
Yeah.
He says it was out of character for her when he got the divorce papers. He's like, who did my wife become? It's like she changed into another person. Dissociative identity disorder. He suddenly saw the other persona, and he had that was suppressed for the 2.5 years they were married before he went to the war. And for the year that he was overseas, he had no idea there was another part of her.
No.
She had never told him that she wanted to become, she had always had a childhood dream of becoming an actress. She never told him. She'd hid it from him. And she'd hid these other personality from him. He never saw it. So suddenly it comes out like a fire hose. So he's like, what's happening here? Who did my wife become? And then Cindy says, and so Norma Jean says, well, she had sexual trauma growing up. She never sorted it out over her lifetime, that sexual trauma. And this is the tragic part. She says, Jim is telling her that she didn't understand. He loved her not for her body. She was pretty. I mean, she got a lot of plastic surgery to become Marilyn Monroe. He loved her for her heart, her personality, and her soul, because she was a poet and she loved children, and she was really well read. And he's not an intellectual. He wasn't Arthur Miller, but he was a smart guy. And he loved the fact that she's reading books. She's like, she hasn't finished high school. She read more books than him, right? He loved that. He was attracted to it. And he's like, and now Norma Jean says, well, she had a hard time trusting men that could love her for herself. She didn't.
Bingo.
There you go.
Bingo.
She didn't believe. She's like, Jim is telling me he loves me because of my mind. That sounds like a lot of bullshit to me. Nobody knows. Nobody cares about that I read books. So
She
is he
never
lying to me?
believed in her value.
Yeah, she didn't see that. She's like, and the tragedies later, she would say she would want DiMaggio to appreciate.
I
her
say
for that.
no. I say
sorry?
that's untrue. I say
What is
that's
untrue?
untrue.
Oh,
It's not that. You'll hear that all the time from people from these types of backgrounds that say, I can't find someone that can love me for myself. And that's not the problem. The problem is they really don't know who they are. So they look for attachments in different people in so many different avenues, because she didn't know who she was. So everybody she meets is not going to love her for herself, because she doesn't know who she is. And she's always going to say that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I mean, honestly, the truth is this: because she had 4 years, I mean, she may not have emotionally grasped it, but she did objectively have a man that intellectually she understood loved her for herself, and she walked away from it. So it doesn't fit her narrative, because then she marries all these scumbags who just want the Marilyn Monroe persona. She would say they go to sleep with me and they wake up. They go to sleep with Marilyn. They wake up the next day with Norma Jean, and they're not happy. Right. And Jim went to sleep with Norma Jean and woke up with Norma Jean because he never saw Marilyn. He never even knew her. Right. And so that narrative is something I think she told herself, because it's too painful to say, well, I really did walk away from something like that, so I have to be a little bit of a victim. But that's human. So I'll keep going. And now it says, my friend Cindy says she created the Marilyn Monroe persona to compensate for her childhood trauma. And this is interesting. She said the Monroe persona was her wearing her pain outwards. It was the sexually abused child showing her sexual abuse in the form of sexuality. And, and so she was.
It's a way to take power too.
Yeah, it's a way to power. It's like, I am the one. You want to sexualize me? Well, I'm going to sexualize myself better, right? And also, even though she wanted children, she had a fear of having kids. We do know that she'd said that. She even said it in some of her interviews that she wanted children, was afraid, and often she said it's because her mother was mentally ill, so she's afraid she'd be mentally ill like her mother. But this is what Cindy said. She said she actually didn't trust men around children after her molestation, and she knew that Jim wasn't going to molest her kids, but instinctively she feared any man around children based on this experience. She's like, can I trust any man to not touch my child? Right. So the other thing is, Cindy says she had alcoholism around her as a kid. Now, I had not heard any confirmation of that initially, but I found actually an article that was written by Jim's sister, which upset Norma Jean very much. When she was famous at Marilyn in 1952, at the height of her fame, Jim's sister wrote an article about her life with her brother, and she didn't like that family ever talking about it. Jim, as a rule, would not talk to the press, right, to preserve her privacy, but his sister did it, and actually revealed, and I've read the original article, I mean, it's available on the web, I've read it, where she says that one of Norma Jean's foster parents was such an alcoholic that she, as a child, she didn't have dolls, she would use the empty liquor bottles as dolls. She would draw faces on them, which is horrifying, right? It's just horrifying. But that confirmed what Cindy said, that one of her foster parents was an alcoholic, so she was around extreme alcoholism as a child. And then she had learned very quickly, she knew how to use her power to get out of bad situations and to get what she wanted. It was her superpower. Very quickly, she realized, I'm pretty, or at least people think I'm pretty. I don't think I am, but this is my way to get out of a problem, right? And that became her crutch. And then she says that she said she thought Jim was boring. He was a normal guy. He went hunting and fishing, right? And he's a normal dude, right? And she didn't want a boring life. And she was super intuitive, had visions of her future. This is easily confirmed because she wrote a lot of things about dreams she had that would later happen to her. We have those records. She even wrote that when she first met Peter Lawford, remember the guy said that introduced her to the Kennedys? We have her letter where she wrote the night that she met him, she had a really bad feeling about him. She thought he would kill her someday. That's it. We have her handwritten note when she said, Peter Lawford's going to kill me. This was 5 years before she dies. He's going to kill me. I feel it. So she would have these visions of her future. But the other side of the visions is that she could see Marilyn Monroe. Even as a child, she would have the visions of the archetypal moments of her life, like standing on the grate with the white dress. She could see herself being this person, which made no sense. So she psychically would see these moments. So she's like, I have to, this is my destiny. I have to fulfill it. And Jim's not going to be part of that because I don't see him in that destiny. So it kind of sucks for him, right? But and
it's interesting. It's interesting, Kamran, all the things that you're talking about in experience in people that I've known. She sounds empathic. She sounds empathic because empaths are not born. They're made through extraordinary trauma. You know, and when you talk about those things and the visions of forward and having these moments, these, you know, iconographical moments that as a child, I have talked to other people who've gone through trauma who had those things and have, it's deja vu. And I don't know if there's actually a credible scientific explanation, but I can tell you as someone who is a skeptic of a lot of things, I do believe in those things. I do believe that when trauma occurs like that, especially in a child has so much energy and creativity that has to go somewhere. And I do think it goes forward into some type of slipstream, has a coping or survival mechanism, and comes back with these little, I don't know, shards of whatever. So I did not know that about Marilyn Monroe at all.
Well, it is, you know, she's has interviews where she said, you know, what people imagine me to be. I've read the interview. She said it in 1956 or 57, that what people think of me as the girl that's going to be found one day overdosed, you know, in the bedroom with, you know, overdose of sleeping pills. She said that in an interview in 57. That's what people imagine is going to be her fate because she's seeing her fate. Right. And yet she can't get out of it. She's being pushed towards it. And so this is an amazing thing because the next thing that Cindy said confirmed something that Jim wrote in his memoir that everyone said, Jim, you're wrong. All historians say you're wrong. And she confirmed it. So the official narrative of how she got the name Marilyn Monroe is that the studio executive at the 20th Century Fox gave her the name Marilyn because she reminded him of Marilyn Miller, who was a famous stage actress that had her sort of bubbly vibe, and Monroe was her mother's maiden name, and they combined it. That any history book will tell you that that's the official narrative of how it happened, right? However, Jim in his memoir says that's not true because he was there when she came in and said, I have a new name. I'm Marilyn Monroe, right? He was there, and he said, where the hell did you get that name from? And she's like, well, Monroe is my mother's maiden name. But Marilyn is the name of my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, you know, and he's like, really? You didn't know any of your grandmother? She's like, no, it's from my grandmother. And he thought that was very strange, right? So that's in his memoir. And I looked her up. So her grandmothers, none of her four grandmothers, we now know her father was Stanley Gifford. We know who he was. So we can look up their ancestry. None of the four grandmothers was Mary. However, her great grandmother was Marilyn. Her great grandmother, who died in the 1880s, she had no knowledge of that, right? But so Cindy tells me her grandmother Mary would come to her in dreams and tell her her future, which fits in that she adopts the name of Marilyn, as Jim said, and all historians said. Obviously, you don't know your wife very well. She didn't have a grandmother named Mary, right? Well, we now know she did, and Cindy is telling us that was the woman that would appear in her dreams and would tell her, this is your future. So this is a weirdly paranormal thing in her life from the very beginning. It's all paranormal, right? So now this is some very painful stuff we're going to get to, where now we talk about her death. So she came through and said, so the Kennedys were responsible, and the Kennedys tag teamer, so both Bobby and JFK would take turns, and I guess sometimes they would do it together, right? And so she said it was a very dark family, very sinister family. And at the time, by 1962, when she's in this love triangle with these Kennedys, right, she's also heavily on drugs, right, at the time. And, it's never been confirmed because the official narrative is that she had alcohol and sleeping pills. There's no official confirmation, but Cindy says she was on heroin at the time. And she was what we saw in that Happy Birthday to You is someone who's highly drugged up at the time as well. She's very Yeah, that's obvious. I mean, that's not a normal person. So she was heavily, and then this is the ugly stuff, which has been claimed. Private detective was one of the people who had bugged her home, claimed it. Fred Otosh, that she said this to RFK, that he heard it on the bug. So Cindy confirmed. She said that she got pregnant with Robert Kennedy's child, and Robert Kennedy forced her to abort it. And remember, now this is 36 now. She's already had multiple losses. Hey, Gooch, welcome. She had
Gooch.
multiple, miscarriages, rumors that the studios had forced her to have abortions during her starlet days, and now this would have been her last chance, really, to have a natural child. And Kennedy got her pregnant, and then he's like, "Look, you're gonna abort that kid," and maybe Secret Service basically grabbed her and took her to the doctor against her will, right? Which is really horrifying, right? So she was forced to abort the child that she wanted to have just before she died. So that's more of a tragedy. Cindy confirmed that. Cindy said in the end, she was suffering a combination of drugs and mental illness, right? And she was completely exhausted. By the time she died, she was broken physically. She was exhausted by the journey of her life. All the stardom had burned her out. She was tired, and she didn't have anything more to, even if they hadn't killed her, she was probably close to suicidal anyway. And I'll go on. And then, then the Kennedy's abuser. Now, this is the painful stuff, because she talks about, so Jim's like, so why didn't you, so basically after their marriage ended, she had no further contact with Jim. They had a couple of phone calls afterwards to like deal with practical stuff. Like he actually gave her his car after the divorce. This is still kind of head over heels in love this guy is. They're divorced. He keeps the car in the divorce.
Yeah.
And he hears that she's broke, that she's got no transportation to auditions. He's like, oh, fuck it. So he goes to her house and says, you can have my car, right? Because just take it. I love you. You need transportation. This is a dedicated dude, right? And so, but she had no communication with him except for a couple of times, like that when that article from the sister came out, she called very angry. How can you let your family talk about me? And so he, but he was very hurt that she basically cut off any communication with him. She wouldn't, and he was like, all right, fine. I'm just going to get married and move on. You don't want to talk to me anymore. I thought we had more than that, but now she explains. Cindy says, she said she didn't talk to Jim again because she knew she hurt him and she didn't want to keep hurting him. Like every time if I called him again, it would open up that wound for him. So she wanted him to forget about her. She wanted him to be free of her, which is, of course, a problem when you're the most famous woman on the face of the earth, right? How is he ever going to be free of her? He talked about this, that he can't escape her. Like even to this day, even in his 80s, when he wrote his memoir, he's like, I walk into a bookstore, her face is everywhere. It's like 2005. I walk into a bookstore. I walk into, barbershop. Like my barber has her picture up, right? From the 40s, right? I go to any newsstand. There's still Marilyn Monroe. There's still Marilyn Monroe magazines about her life.
Sponsors are hot topic,
It's interesting who ended up with Marilyn Monroe's estate.
Yeah.
So, and Cameron, you undoubtedly know this, but
I don't know.
I think
people, yes.
She bequeathed, I think, 75% of it to Lee Strasberg in
her acting
his
teacher,
wife.
Yes.
Everybody, the Strasberg method, man. I mean, that informed me when I was a theater kid. But then Strasberg died. Before he died, his wife preceded him. And then Strasberg married another woman who was
like
kind
a 20-year-old girl. He was like 70, married a 20-year-old girl. Yeah.
Yes. He's like Hyman Roth in the Godfather movie, like picking up chicken. You know what I mean? This 20-year-old girl. So Lee Strasberg dies, and then this nobody 20-something.
She gets the Marilyn Monroe estate.
She got all Marilyn Monroe's money and estate and likeness,
and the image, the rights to her image.
The image too.
The image, the
she made $100 million licensing that image. This girl, that 20-year-old girl with no connection to Marilyn.
Sleep with Lee Strasberg for a couple of years, and now it all belongs to this person just by way of marriage because of the will that she wrote. It is really weird. It is really weird.
Strasberg was another example of one of these sleazy Svengalis. Like he was messing with her mind. Dude. Everyone that she gave her money away to were scumbags. Like who's the other? The second largest recipient in her will was the psychiatrist that locked her away in a mental hospital against her will. Yeah. Imagine this shrink has locked her in a mental hospital to the point that she's desperate to get out. She's calling. Eventually, it was DiMaggio that got her out. I don't like DiMaggio, but at least I appreciate that he got her out, right? But and this woman so Svengalis her that even after she's like hates her for locking her in a mental hospital against her permission, against her will, she gives like the second largest amount of her will to this woman.
Rewarding the abuser. It's rewarding the abuser who's the mother figure or the father figure. And that's why I came up with the supposition and the theory that I have. I mean, and again, I am in no position to diagnose or treat anybody's mental health, but I'm just saying, if you look at patterns and you look at other precedents for it, especially those within Hollywood, this rhymes quite a bit,
Rhymes, yeah.
So we'll look at first, and I do want to talk a bit.
Right.
Cindy wanted to talk about, or at least they wanted, Norma Jean and Jim, their spirits apparently, wanted to talk about what happened, why their marriage derailed. And so Norma Jean said, well, Jim's mom didn't like me. And I think that's historically accurate. When Jim went away to war, she had to go live with Jim's mom. And I think anyone can know, I've seen it, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law don't work out easily in any culture, right? And also what starts happening is she gets discovered as a model, and suddenly, Jim's mom, she's living in Jim's mom's house, and Jim is at war. And suddenly all these random sleazy photographers are like, hey, can I talk to Norma Jean? And they would take her out for days. Yeah. Like she would disappear for weeks with doing modeling shoots with these weirdos, right? And the mom's like, hey, aren't you married to my son? What are you doing, right? And so they start fighting. And then she moves out, and she moves back in with one of her foster mothers. And so now the beginning of a break is happening, right? Because now she's no longer living with the Doherty family, right? And I'm sure some of being upset with Jim's mom is projected onto being upset with Jim, even though he's not trying to block her career at this time. He's quite happy to hear that his wife is successful. So, on a very practical level, I mean, in fact, he had a beautiful wife, and everyone wanted his wife. He was proud of that. They were working class people. She was helping pay the rent. I mean, the modeling money was helping, right? I mean, the military allotment and the modeling money was enough to actually start having savings for the first time in their life. They're poor people. And so he's like, yeah, no, baby, keep doing this. It's good. It's good for us, right? So this is the problem. Now, this is where it gets dark, because there's controversy historically about this, but Cindy says this and confirmed it. So Cindy said, by now, she's getting really into the freedom. Jim's away. She's away from the mom, and nobody's telling her what to do anymore. And she's now adult. She's like 20 years old, right? She's an adult now, and she's got her own money, and nobody's bothering her. And now she's like, well, maybe I should just be independent. I don't need a husband. I don't need any of this. And that's what Emmeline is telling her, and other people are telling her. But Jim ain't giving up. Jim thinks this is the woman he's going to have grandchildren with. And the idea of a divorce, he's a good old Irish Catholic guy. He doesn't even think about it, right? Doesn't even occur to him. So he's not even thinking about that. And so this is what Cindy says. Cindy says she decided to force the situation. Again, this is a 20-year-old young woman who's, and she decided, well, if he's not going to divorce me, I'm going to hurt him so much he's going to divorce me. So she starts openly having affairs, which is, again, this is a change from the good girl that she at least appeared to be in the early part of the marriage. So this is the controversial thing. Officially, both Marilyn Monroe and Jim both said that during her marriage, that she was completely faithful, even though all the photographers wanted to sleep with her, and that she wouldn't do that because she wouldn't do that to Jim. That is the official narrative that both of them said to their dying day. However, historians believe that she lied because there's this very sleazy, insidious photographer, very famous photographer, Andre de Deens, who's a Hungarian photographer who made her famous. He got her some of her biggest cover models. She went off. So Jim comes back for Christmas in 1945. He's back for Christmas break, for shore leave. And when he arrives, she's like, Andre shows up. He's like, well, your wife and I, we're going to go on a trip, right? So it's like, and so they have a month contract to go on the road to take pictures all over the West Coast. Most husbands are like, who the fuck is this guy? You're not going to leave for Christmas and go with this asshole, right, for a month and spending every night in a hotel with him. But Jim's like, no. Jim idealized her. He's like, this is my sweet innocent angel. She will never cheat on me. Go, baby, I trust you, right? And what she does is Andre claimed that she cheated with him. That and to her credit, as Andre said, for the first 3 weeks he pressured her to have sex every night while they were doing the photo shoots, and she said, no, I'm loyal to my husband. And finally, one night she said, fuck it, let's do it. And then they have sex. And then he actually turns out to be a bit of an abusive asshole, right? She gets scared of him. Like what happens is, this is all Andre's account because she denied it. And so Andre's account is that, they slept together. She became lovers on the trip. He thought she was going to leave Jim for him, right? And then they got into an argument because she left the car door unlocked and someone stole all of his equipment, like expensive equipment. So he comes back, all of his photo equipment is gone.
Shit's gone.
And so he apparently got a little physical with her, right? Got really angry, and that scared the shit out of her. She called, Jim confirmed, she calls crying on the phone, calls Jim, says, I want to come home. Baby, I just want to come home right now. I don't like this guy. I'm kind of scared of him. Jim confirmed that call and said, please, honey, just forget that asshole. Come back right now, right? So we have the official historians believe Andre is telling the truth, but we have her narrative. So which is true, right? And so this is what she said. Cindy said, no, she did have an affair with Andre, and she was trying to force Jim to break up with her, but Jim didn't do it. And the reason that Cindy claimed that Norma Jean had this affair and then denied it, because she didn't deny her future. She had affairs on DiMaggio and had affairs on Miller. She didn't deny those. Those were publicly known, especially the Miller one became public, huge gossip, right? She didn't deny that. So why did she deny this? And Cindy says because she didn't care about Andre. She was manipulating him because he's a famous photographer, and she was going to give him sex to advance her career. That was the beginning of the prostitution, right? That it had been put into her head. And Emmeline's like, just make him happy. He'll give you what you want. And so she was actually at that time very ashamed of being that kind of person. So to her dying day, she never admitted that happened because she didn't want to be remembered as a prostitute. I can believe that. Ladies, do you think that's any of that? I mean, which narrative do you believe? Do you believe she did not? Do you believe her story or Andre's? I mean, I have a psychic claiming things. I don't know the truth. What's your instinct as a woman as to what happened there?
Well, my instinct, like I said before, as a woman that has gone through hell and gone through the same kind of mental gymnastics that this would take, is she meets good guy, right? And things are going well. And then she meets these other people and she's suddenly put on this pedestal. And this at the time for movies and photography, and then of course they're wanting her to get into the call girl scene. They're filling her head full of things and telling her things, and we don't know how many photography shoots were a little risque or what have you. So when you are in an environment where you are nobody, you become a better somebody to someone else, and then you start doing things that tug at your mind, saying, well, but this person might not approve of that, or wait, but there's this, and you default to that trauma of this is all I'm worth, is this body, this image. You immediately shed the people that truly matter to you, because you now have gone back to that I'm just worthless and this is all I'm good for mentality. And I think that mentality is what pushed her into proving herself and Jim right. It wasn't, hey, I'm independent, I don't need this guy. It was more, I really am a bad person. I came from a bad place. I'm a horrible person. Let me prove to you I'm going to sleep around with this guy, so you'll leave me and you'll do better for yourself, because you will finally see that I'm the horrible person I think I am.
I believe everything you're saying. And I think that feels intuitively true to me, Squeaka, based on just my research and getting to know her. I'm setting all psychic stuff aside. That feels true to me. But what is also part of the tragedy is Jim, he put her on a pedestal too. He could not face this part of their marriage. To his dying day, I've watched interviews he gave in his 70s. To his dying day, he said, she never cheated on me. She was never that kind of girl. She was an angel. She was perfect. She was sweet, and Hollywood corrupted her. So there's also a human error in that. I've made that error. I fall in love with a girl and I put her on a pedestal and didn't see her for who she was. It wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to me. But I think to his dying day, he couldn't face it either. And so she never actually got that, right? She never got, she wanted him to hate her. I think she wanted him to hate her. I think that's why she wanted him to divorce her and say, well, you are a whore. Your mom was a whore who got, pregnant without a husband, right? And he's like, no, she's an angel. And he died like that. So the whole thing's kind of tragic.
Yeah. I mean, and he was gone away to war for a bit, so she could have laid off the pushing him away during that part. That would have been okay, maybe.
Yeah,
he's not there. Here's are you on a bridge right now? Here's your divorce. Thanks.
The dude's in China.
I know.
Okay, World War II.
It's not a matter of you're missing the point. It's not a matter of she's pushing him away because she has something better to do. She's not doing it with malice towards him. The most important thing to remember about people with trauma, when they push people away, it's because they are saying to themselves, I am a horrible person. I don't need you to talk to me. I am doing you a favor by making myself go away.
Yeah, it's like you're destroying yourself to get
It's a
them to go away.
maladaptation. It's a maladaptation because you believe that initial programming and the abuse that was put on you, because when children or people that are young and don't have the emotional capacity to understand what's happening to them, instead of blaming their abusers, they internalize and say, I must have done something.
I'm the person that attracted that guy to put me on his bed and touch me, right?
Yeah.
I'm the person that is a Jezebel. I'm the Jezebel, right? Because otherwise that wouldn't have happened to me. I must have, it's and thank you for Squeak. I know this is very personal stuff. I know the girl. The girl that I loved, that it was very similar to Norma Jean's situation. It didn't work out for a lot of the same reasons. I understood that years later. I kind of understood that she pushed me away real hard because she didn't want to be loved. She wanted to be angry at herself, and I was actually a problem. It was a problem at that moment in her life, and so it's very real. I've been on.
No. It's not that they don't want to be loved. I'm going to fix that. It's not that they don't want to be loved. They want to be loved so desperately, but they have no clue what it looks like.
I agree.
And so every time they get love, there's always that thought of, is this right? What are they getting out of this? What am I going to fuck up? I mean, mess up. Like what? There's so many thoughts that it is not that they don't want to be loved. They don't understand it.
You can fucking swear here, Squeak, if you want.
It's okay.
It's like what Squeak said earlier. You're waiting for the other foot to, the other shoe to drop, basically.
Yeah. So what's going to screw this up? This can't be real. I can't actually have like a normal life and like at home, and there's no one abusing me. There's no one hitting me. You know, one of the things Cindy said is that she could not understand that why Jim didn't see her as a sexual object. Like, he obviously enjoyed having sex with her. She's a pretty girl. He liked that. But he was like, I love the fact that she likes poetry. I love the fact that she likes animals. It makes me, he would read his memoir. It's like the wonder, he's like poetically writes about her playing with a dog. Like that would be, he would fall in love with her just sitting there on the porch, watching her play with their dog. Right. That's what he loved. And she's like, I don't what? I mean, every other guy every other guy was like checking out her boobs. I mean, she started developing at like 10, right? Every other guy was like, and he's like, I'm sure he was enjoying her body, but that was not, he never talked about that. He's like, I loved her because I never met I'm a normal guy from Van Nuys, and this girl with no education can discuss philosophy with me.
I'm going to jump in. I think so she knew she was beautiful, but it's like a self-confidence issue. And I've struggled with that as well. And like depression, and your mind can just tear you apart.
Yeah.
And you can just go into all these zones that no normal person would go into. So, I mean, I can only imagine what Norma was dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, and she unfortunately found people who knew that about her, whether she told them that or not, or whether they were.
Oh, they just sniffed it. They sniffed it in her. Yeah.
That's it.
You can smell trauma.
Yeah. So then they just did what they did to how many other girls, and it just happened to be Marilyn Monroe.
Okay, so I know how this works. Because let me tell you a weird, strange fact. I started college at 17 years old, and I was a typical, I was extremely attractive. I will tell you to this day that I'm the ugliest thing that ever walked this earth, but I was really attractive, and I was always told I wasn't. I started college, and the next thing I know, it's like people are thinking I'm pretty. I'm going out on dates. I grew up in a very small town, so I'd never heard all this before. I got recruited by an escort service. Like this happens. And like Lovett said, I was told constantly. I had people paying for it.
Yeah.
Not that kind of escort. It was really actually I just hung out with people. There was not any of that.
Just your company, just your presence. Yeah.
But it was still like, I was like, what?
Yeah.
You people are so blind, and you are so conditioned that it doesn't matter how many acts or movies or photographies or anything that you do. The thing is you will always come down to, you're going to go home. You're going to drink your alcohol, take your roofie, do whatever you do to make yourself realize, wait, I really am a bad person, and go to bed. And then you get up the next day and you put on the same act because you think. It's part of that imposter syndrome too. OMG, I'm lying to all these people. They think I'm pretty. I'm not.
And that fits what Marilyn Monroe, as Marilyn Monroe, Norma would say later in life. She's like, I just don't get it. I mean, I've created this Monroe persona, right? But I just don't know what people are seeing. It's not real, right? If people want to surround me and mob me over this fake thing, sure, I'll go with it, right? So I'm winding down to sort of the last things I'll say here about the psychic stuff here. So, she did. She did say that she did love being part of Hollywood. She loved that time that she was doing it. She really admired Betty Davis. Betty Davis, she was in All About Eve with her. That was her first break, right? Where she got a few minute scene with Betty Davis. Everyone's like, who the hell is this girl, right? Everyone noticed her. And she said Betty Davis initially didn't like her, but eventually came to like her and was kind to her. And so she had like a little bit of a mentorship in Betty Davis, who she wanted to become. This is part of her tragedy. She wanted to be a serious actress like Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, or other people that, could be working into her 80s. And she didn't, Norma Jean did not want to be the sex pot. she didn't believe in it, but she wanted to be remembered as someone who could do Shakespeare, right? And one of the things you mentioned earlier that we have some of her psychiatrist notes from just before she died, where she was planning to set up a Shakespeare company, a Marilyn Monroe Shakespeare company, where she would play
the same thing.
Lady Macbeth.
In Cameron, I mean the article from Dorothy Kilgallen, I think it's only a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Dorothy Kilgallen, look her up. She was I guess from the 30s and 40s, equal to like Barbara Walters, an investigative reporter, was always in courtrooms, was friends with Ernest Hemingway. This woman was a fucking legend, okay? And she was really close with Marilyn Monroe, and she had a gossip or advice column in addition to legitimate journalism. But 2 weeks before Marilyn's death, she wrote an article talking about how Marilyn had gotten it together. There were all those stories about Marilyn was fucked up. She was constantly being late to productions and shoots, things like that, but she'd met the man of her dreams, and this is after the divorce, the third divorce, and that I want to show it after you talk about the psychic stuff, but everything you're talking about, it's just to go back to the death, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. If she was, and this is going to sound terrible, but if she was, let's say, in her 50s or 60s and had been forgotten, maybe you would expect something like what we found here in some sleazebag hotel where she self-deletes.
Yeah, someone was looking back at 20 years.
But not like this, not where she was, not with things turning a corner, and even with that, I say, is highly suspect psychiatrist that she was going to.
Oh no, he was a
having
scumbag.
All the documentation.
He was a complete scumbag. Yeah, he was. So let me wind down with some interesting thing about parallel universes. So the idea, whether one believes in destiny or not. So Cindy was saying that there are alternative universes, alternative choices that Jim could have made, that she could have made, that would have changed the course of their direction, right? And so on the other side, Norma Jean can see the other universes, that the other life she could have led had she decided, maybe because it wasn't black and white. You have to divorce Jim or you be an actor. You can't be an actress. They had Jim stuck with her. I mean, again, but they dropped her in 6 months. So it wasn't like some intense commitment from Fox. They didn't care, right? They just got sex out of her, threw her away, right? It took her several years to get another contract, right? She was just wandering through Hollywood for those years. But let's say she had, because Jim was not opposed to her being an actress. He was opposed to her hanging out with these scumbags, right? And would have stopped that, which was the problem, right? But let's say had she said, I'll stick with you and we'll work it out. And maybe I don't do the Fox thing, or maybe I tell Fox, because there's no legal way they can force her to get divorced. It's not written in the contract. It's just pressure, right? So it's like, I'm just like, screw you. I'm going to stick with my guy, and he's going to drive me around to my audition. So it won't be sleazy producers doing it anymore, right? And he's from the military, so I don't want to fuck with him, right? They wouldn't have fucked with him, because then he joins the LAPD, and the LAPD is the scariest mafia in LA. I mean, especially the 40s. LAPD, if you imagine that she was married to an LAPD top like sniper guy, right? And then the LAPD hears that some producer made a pass at her. They'd show up at that guy's house, put a gun to his head and say, you ever touch her again, we're going to blow your brains out in front of your kids.
Or
right?
plant evidence. Or plant evidence. Because that's the easiest way to just take care of shit, right? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that's what this guy wrote about. I mean, the LAPD, they were basically gangsters. And Jim was in that. He wasn't a gangster himself, but he was in the system. And so imagine that she would have been safe had she said, I'm going to stick with my husband. He's a military guy. He's going to protect me, and he's going to join the LAPD, and no one's going to mess with me. And then I'm going to take serious acting lessons and become Betty Davis. It probably would have been a slower rise. She wouldn't have become a sex icon, which maybe ultimately would have been better for her. We would have lost, her with the white dress flowing up and the iconic imagery, but maybe she would have become Betty Davis as a character actress working into her 80s, right? So Cindy said she saw from the afterlife, she can see what would have happened had she taken the other route, the road less taken. And it's really tragic. She says in that other life, she had a beautiful baby daughter with Jim, and they had a
I believe that. I believe that.
She could see that other that world. Oh, did we lose?
Yeah, you had to go. Thank you, Squeaka.
Sorry, I hope I didn't say anything to push her away. So.
Oh no, she has to go. She probably had to go like half an hour ago. So.
Okay, all right. So
thank you so much.
That's tragic and sad, but. So now I'm gonna close it out with this. So, with just the last three things she told me. So, she said, look, her trauma was so deep. This is Marilyn supposedly speaking to my friend Cindy. He said Norma Jean admitted that her trauma was so deep that it screwed up her life. and that when Jim was away overseas, she felt free for the first time in her life. Nobody was telling her what to do ever, right? And if he hadn't gone to war, she would have stayed with him for the rest of her life. And she got swept away in the freedom. And, but what's interesting is she said that she actually doesn't regret it. She sees the other universes where she could have had a more normal life and didn't become as famous as Marilyn Monroe, but would have been, Jean Norman, the proud character actress, right? And she's like, no, actually, I was meant here to come. Marilyn Monroe was a human part of history that changed history. And so I accept that was my destiny. And, I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't have chosen the alternative lives, which is an interesting thing. I wouldn't have expected Cindy to say that, but that's what she said. And then I asked a question, because there's one thing that always troubled me, which is that Jim never said a bad thing about her to the press. Like I said, she's a sweet angel who got corrupted by bad people, never said a bad thing. But she said a few hurtful things. I mean, she never said he was a bad guy. She never said he hit her. He said, no, you never hurt me. He didn't. But I was bored, which is in itself kind of hurtful to read about. Your wife is saying this about you in national press, that I was a boring guy. It's hurtful, right? It's a little hurtful. And why did she say some of these things that kind of made him look like a cheesy dude, right? Which I don't think is fully accurate. And this is what Cindy said. She said it was actually because several reasons. One is, she had to make it appear, because remember, these interviews are done in 1952 when she's with DiMaggio. She's not famous before then. By 52, she becomes somebody, right? For 6 years, she's like struggling actress. By 52, she's getting real roles, and DiMaggio gets an interest in her. When DiMaggio starts dating her, she explodes as like DiMaggio's girl. And then that's the moment where she becomes Marilyn Monroe to the world. So it's 52. So it's about 6 years later. And so she's with DiMaggio right now. And she's created an official narrative where she's an independent, spunky, proto-feminist woman in the 50s, right? Ahead of her time. And that's the narrative the studios are putting out there, that this is the girl, that your girl's going to be like this. She's free of the old ball and chain. She's making her own post-war life, right? And she said the problem is, Jim, the marriage to Jim screws that up. Like, well, she was a housewife and she cooked. And she cleaned the house. Jim was like, she kept the house spotless, right? He's like, she was the best, she's the best homemaker I'd ever, And it's like, that doesn't fit me.
Hypothesis.
Please give me a hypothesis.
Do you think maybe if she had the baby, it would have changed her fate? Or do you think maybe she still would have went down the road of being a Marilyn Monroe?
I think the baby would have changed her fate. I do think as a result, I don't think she would have been Marilyn Monroe. She would have been the other name. Her stage name that she wanted was Jean Norman. She flipped her name upside down. She thought Jean Norman sounds like an actress, right? So this is again, this was them on Catalina Island. That's her on the left. That's Jim on the. He's a handsome guy, right? He's a good looking guy, very masculine guy, right? And so. And there's some poor schlubs in the middle has no idea. He's next to Marilyn Monroe. Dude, like 1940, 43, doesn't have any idea what this is.
He probably talked about that for decades. He's like, look at
He's
that.
like, yeah, I was the dude in the picture. I was like, this girl.
Yeah.
I was ready, bitch.
It's like, look at the people behind, normal people like on Catalina Island. But so I think she would have become Jean Norman, a very respected actress like Angela Lansbury. I think she would have become Angela Lansbury. I think she wouldn't have broken as a famous person until she had aged out of the sexy bombshell. She probably would have had broken as an actress until her late 20s and early 30s. She would have gotten the plastic surgery that made her look like Marilyn Monroe. She would have been a pretty but charismatic actress and a little bit of a star. And she wouldn't have been Marilyn Monroe, but she would have worked for the rest of her life, and she would have balanced it like Angela Lansbury. They all had kids.
Yeah, a baby changes you definitely, and that
And
probably made her
done
better.
TV mom stuff or TV aunt stuff,
Exactly.
which would have been probably a lot safer with a longer lifespan, but woulda, coulda, shoulda, right?
But that's an iconic, it's a choice. So the other thing that she said is like, one is she had to say that about Jim because it was now embarrassing for her that she had been a homemaker for 4 years. It doesn't fit the image the studio's putting out of her as independent feminist, right? It doesn't fit her image. So she's like, he was a boring guy. I felt bored in the marriage. I needed to get out. That's kind of something an independent-minded woman in the 50s might say, right? And divorce.
And also the young age in which she got married.
Yes.
There's a big emotional and intellectual gap between 16 and 20 with anybody.
Oh yeah.
Now, even then, okay, and then to have been married for 4 years and not essentially being just out of being a child, and I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. Things were very different back then. You can still get married at 16 in some states, but then to come out of that on 20 with your husband being gone on the military, and then suddenly, like everybody just talked about, to get that independence, you start wanting more. and more and more. And you take for granted the stability that you just talked about, Cameron. And suddenly the flashy stuff looks a lot more important than the ground you're standing on, you know?
And also because she's naive, she doesn't believe people are bad. She believes, she knows she has to sleep with these producers, but she's going to get that out of her life as quickly as possible and meet a nice guy like Joe DiMaggio who's going to be a good husband. Turns out Joe DiMaggio is not a good husband. Turns out he wants her as Marilyn Monroe in his house. She goes out as Marilyn Monroe. He slaps her around, right? She marries Arthur Miller. She thinks she's marrying a great intellectual because she wants to be seen as an intellectual. Turns out he's a scumbag. He's having affairs on her. You know, he's psychologically abusing her because I know. Well, intelligent guys can be the most dangerous guys. They know how to worm into you. I think women would admit this. Like smart guys know how to worm into your insecurities.
They can play the slow game too.
Exactly. And that's what he did. That's why she was a basket case. She got out of her marriage, her abusive marriage with DiMaggio in 9 months, and she went on to more success. After she gets out of Miller, she's in a mental hospital 1 month later, and 18 months later, she's dead, right? I mean, that's how badly that guy screwed her up. So just to finish off what I was saying about the other things that Cindy said, which is very interesting. She said one is the PR. One is the PR of she had to keep the image of I'm an independent woman, and that was a young marriage. I was immature, and it's over, and it was kind of boring, and I wish Jim well, but thank God it's over. Okay, number one. Number two, she said DiMaggio was a jealous freak. DiMaggio was a jealous freak. So had she started talking about her ex-husband, he would have slapped her. He would have slapped her, right? He was like, if she had said that, he would have physically beaten her, right? He broke her thumb. This guy's a scumbag. You know, if you look at photos from their marriage, she has bruises on her arms that the makeup artist couldn't cover. I mean, this guy was beating her like daily. He was a really bad guy. And so she's like, she's not going to talk about her ex-husband. It's probably why she called Jim upset when his sister talked about it to the press, because I'm sure DiMaggio hit her. Because I read the article, sister's like, Norma really loved my husband, my brother. They were soulmates. DiMaggio's not going to want to read that in the press. He's going to go beat her, which is probably what happened. So she was afraid of DiMaggio. So she had to say, no, Jim wasn't that important to me. He was just a marriage of convenience. Now, and the part of it was also taking her power back, like we talked about, taking her power back. All those things Cindy said. She wanted to take her power back, that, you know, she had been 16 and now she can own that experience and reframe it. All fair, right? Not great for Jim, but understandable why she does it. But then the fourth thing is very interesting. And then she admits, she says, the truth is, when Jim got married again, it broke her heart and she was resentful and she wanted to hurt him a little bit. Because part of her, she's thought, you know, he was always going to be there for her. Part of her thought, you know, if this acting thing doesn't work out, I'll just go back to Jim, right? She actually had offered him this.
Right. It's horrible.
It's horrible. She's a human being. She thought that. I mean, we've been in relations where the person thought, I'll leave you, but the baby's going to come back.
Oh, yeah.
It's human.
Yeah. Backup plan.
Backup plan. I mean, it's human, right? And so, but this is the thing that Jim said, which he was shocked when he's like, well, you want to divorce me? She's like, well, look, we can be divorced, but let's still live together. She's like, I like you. I like living with you. Let's just sign the paper so I can take the contract at Fox, but let's just live it together. He's like, what? Divorce me? We're going to live together? So you go off to your movie shoots and maybe hang out with all these handsome men? And I just stay home like a cuckold? I ain't going to do that, right? I'm not doing that. Whether married or not married. Make a choice, right? And so she chose the not marriage. But the fact that she offered, well, let's just live together. I mean, look, this is 1940. This is 1946 to even make that kind of offer. As you have emotional tampon, that's kind of what he's offering here, right?
Fluffer, right?
And here's a funny thing. This fits in this is something that Jim said because Jim didn't understand it. He wrote in his memoir because he believed she didn't love him. He was so heartbroken. It's really heartbreaking. He was going to kill himself. When he got that letter, he was going to jump off the boat because he didn't see it coming. It blindsided him. And he had been for 6 months. Everyone on the boat's like, this guy's got the most beautiful woman in America. He was proud of it. My wife is the most famous model in the country. Yeah. And she's loyal to me. And then suddenly she divorces him, which with all the guys like, she's going to leave you, buddy. She's going to leave you, buddy. She's going to marry Cary Grant. And now it happens. She's going to go marry Cary Grant. He was going to jump off and die. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back and try to fix this, which he did. But so after they divorced, he was heartbroken and said, okay, fine. I'm going to move on. So, but he said, a few weeks go by and he starts like, well, God, I got to start dating again. I guess I don't know what else to do. I'm going to have to start meeting other women. So he starts dating and then he meets sort of like the pretty, let's just say easily accessible girl in the block, right? And so the very pretty girl that all the guys were like, yeah, that's not her. And so he started dating this hot redhead who had a bit of a reputation. And so he comes by back at her house. She's living with her foster mom. I've actually been to where the house was. It's only 10 minutes drive from where I live. I have photos on my Facebook page where the house was. And so it's not right by where the 405 freeway is today, right? So just Sepulveda. So I go there. And he goes there, and so like a month later, he's like, pick up old records and things. When you get a divorce, you still have some stuff at the house, like clothes, records. And they come back to pick up some stuff, and she opens the door, and she sees in his car, he's got this beautiful redhead who's got a little bit of a reputation, and he's dating her now. And she explodes at him. She starts screaming and I love the word. She says, how dare you bring that hussy in our car to our house? He's like, what are you talking about? Our car, you divorced me. Divorced me. I can't date somebody
Boundaries.
else. Yeah,
Boundaries.
Like, no,
and how many dicks have you had in you? Come on, lady.
Rules
like,
for
let's
thee.
get real here, okay?
I mean, this is human. This all. She's like, I believe it because Jim said, in his memoir, he said, I didn't understand it because I believed she didn't care about me anymore, and I was just a means to an end, and she got what she wanted, and she was free now. And I believed that, and it broke me, but I accepted it. And now she's like freaking out that I'm dating this girl and calling her a hussy, and it's like, so to me, that suggests she really had feelings for Jim that was real. And the jealousy was real, and he was her emotional tampon. He was her backup plan, but I think she actually did love him. And that's what Cindy says. She wanted to hurt him a little bit. It's like, I'll tell everybody you were boring and you weren't that great in bed and whatever. And that will be because that's how he is remembered to this day by fans, that he was a boring guy. He's like, she wasn't really happy. She wasn't unhappy. She was sort of, that's how she has colored their relationship for all time as a kind of revenge. And Cindy says she kind of admits she did that to hurt him, which is a little cheesy, but it's human. And then the final thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to shut up now because this is where it ended. This is where, and she said, okay, so I said, does Jim have anything to say after all of this and hearing, because he's in the spirit world is standing next to her while she says all this stuff, right? It's like, Jim. It's like, so Jim, again, she won't let this poor guy talk, right? If that was their marriage, she won't let this guy talk, right? That's their marriage, right? He's like, yeah, baby, well, yeah, that's what their marriage was, right? And so it's like, she won't let him talk about it. I said, can we get one word from Jim? Can we get one word from Jim here? And this is what Jim said. And it's actually very, very emotional. Jim, this is the last thing before Cindy closed the session. Jim said that Norma Jean did not understand. I never stopped loving her. And his second wife knew that. His second wife was incredibly jealous. The second wife knew that Jim was kind of settling and that Jim had never gotten over the first wife, right? She knew that. She hated her. She wouldn't let him mention her. She forced Jim to burn all of Norma Jean's love letters. She had written 200 love letters over the course of their marriage. She forced him to burn all of them. So that's a loss to historians as well, right?
Could have sold those. Yeah,
he has said that it would be worth millions of dollars. Her sister sold her wedding dress to Jim. Her wedding dress from Jim. Her sister sold her wedding dress after Norma Jean died. Her sister, she had a half sister, sold her wedding dress for like $100,000. Right? It's not like the family members weren't doing that; they were doing that. He burned them because, like, you know what? I don't want to hurt my wife. She's already overshadowed by this woman. She has to deal with your husband was married to Marilyn Monroe. It's like, does he really love you? And he's got kids, and the kids like, do you really love mommy? Did you want us? So he's like, fine. But he said the truth is, he was right. He did love her most, and he never stopped loving her. And this is what he said, which is very painful, which is, had at any moment in the next 16 years that she ever called and said, I was in trouble, I'm in trouble, he would have gotten in the car and gone to her immediately. Like if she had called on August 4th, 1962 and said, Robert Kennedy came to my house and he slapped me around and he's coming back later tonight with some guys and I'm scared. He would have come to her house with his gun and would have shot Kennedy in the head, right? He would have done. It would have been Sirhan. He would have protected her. He said he would have left his wife for her. Had she ever called and said, I love you and I want to come back, he would have thrown his marriage and the beautiful life he built out the window. That's how much he was in love with her. And she did not, because she knew that he would do that, right? She's like, I'm not going to ruin this guy's life and his children, like break up their marriage and his children get fucked up like I got fucked up, right? So I'm just going to let him go. And that's really horrifically painful, because then he spends the next 60 years haunted by her. Like, he can't ever escape her. He feels like, could I have saved her? Should I have kept contact with her? Should I have stopped Kennedy? He couldn't do anything. And so to me, that's incredibly tragic. This whole thing is a tragic romance, of destiny that nobody had power over. So I'm going to shut up now. That was the whole thing.
That was
Thank you,
intense.
It's a lot to process.
No, it is interesting. I mean, when you look at these, we now consider them icons. Obviously, even back then, we're talking about the early 60s when this happened. I mean, America was really in a state of cultural transition. And even in the 50s, you had more the puritanical stuff, but it really was kind of that flip, when Sinatra was coming on and some of these other guys. And then you had the Kennedys, start to come in. Yeah, the country was, loosening up. I mean, the 60s were such a major decade, a clear declination of post-World War II life to where we end up at the late 60s with, look at Chicago in 68, the hippies, Vietnam, much more anger and all this other stuff. So in a lot of ways, I mean, I think you can look at the 60s in things like Marilyn Monroe and the development of this iconography. There were movie stars, obviously, in the 40s, and throughout the 50s, some iconic ones, but it really, to me, isn't until the 60s where you start developing, it's almost like a whole other pantheon of Americana and American icons, especially within cinema. And clearly, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, all of those people were right around that same period. And then where things went from there, it's just a tragedy. Marilyn Monroe, I think, is a lot of tragedy, and I wish we knew how and why the circumstances of her death occurred. I still think the CIA had a hand in it. Either that or Robert Kennedy was told, or Robert. Oh, yeah, I've skimmed it, but I think Robert Kennedy
it was
either
Kennedy and
CIA, or the CIA helped him cover it up. Just because I think it's undeniable, that Kennedy was involved in it. I do think that maybe somebody else was also helping. In addition, or told him do this shit or else,
Yeah, well, the Kennedys had handlers. I mean, the president of the United States always has somebody behind them, right? So
yeah.
Lovett's got to get going, so let's get her promotional stuff up. And thanks for coming for the first time. You've been awesome.
Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed this chat and all the information I did not know about. So a lot to digest.
Well, what are you doing your channel?
Yeah.
Huh? My channel? Lovett Ever After.
Yeah. Well, you do that. You've tricked me a couple times, but what do you do generally on your channel?
I just play Sims 4 content, and I started doing some RPG gameplay. So that's basically all I do, and it's just whenever I have free time to stream.
And you have 147 subs right now. We can at least get her to 160 right now. Would be nice if we could do that, people.
Where's the link? Can you put the link up? I'll go.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat. Let's do this.
Thank you, guys. The only sub if you really want to watch the content. I'm not.
I just subbed right now because I want to watch the content.
They want to watch the content. You had one where I thought you acted like it was
4 sister wives. I'm going to go to the 4 sister wives video as a Muslim who can have 4 wives.
There you go.
Your take on that? Yeah.
You can, but do you really want that many, dude? That's the question.
True, yeah. So once you had a stream and you were talking about someone who passed away, and I thought it was like a real funeral thing going on, and I commented, and it was one of your Sims had died. I didn't. Yeah. Well, oh my god. Okay. Well, I'm out of here now. Shh, don't tell anyone. Then I told everyone.
I definitely clickbaited them.
You did. It's
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and hopefully, maybe another day in the future.
Absolutely.
Lovett might appear.
Nice meeting you.
It's a wonderful. Thank you so much, Lovett.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Lovett.
Bye, Gooch.
Gooch. My microphone keeps dropping, but not in a mic drop fun way. But this is for Gooch. I haven't played a song in for him yet. So if you could pick a movie, Gooch, for Marilyn Monroe to play, current day, what would it be?
I think you know.
Oh, Coyote Ugly, right?
Yeah, Coyote.
Well, I'm packing up my game and I'm head out west where real women come equipped with scripts and fake breasts. Find a nest in the hills, chill like Flint, buy an old drop top, find a spot.
Okay. I've never seen this movie. I feel like I should go see this movie.
You should go see it.
I know. I haven't seen it either. I just saw
I honestly thought we were reviewing this movie tonight, but I guess we were talking about something else. So,
well, thanks, Gooch, for coming hang out. Great show earlier.
Yeah, it was okay. It was not bad. We had a lot of fun.
Ninja Scroll, good movie. Cameron, can we talk about your Patreon stuff for a minute?
Sure. Do you want to talk about content of Patreon, or just want me to pitch it? What would you like to do?
Well, today there was a couple of things I noticed that I commented on for Michelle. One was the redoing, or is it a remake of Spartacus, or is it a
No. You know, the
reboot?
Spartacus series on Stars that was like almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it feels
I love Spartacus. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that show. Andy Whitfield, God rest his soul, incredible first season. Nothing ever matched him. Good guy replaced him, still couldn't live up to it, right? But it was a great show. And so that show ended back in the early 2000s, and now they're doing a reboot / sequel that's a little bizarre because it's called The House of Ashur, which is one of the most popular gladiator villains, bad guys, was this Nick Tarabay, brilliant. He's actually a Syrian actor, and he's a brilliant actor. He played this sort of anti-hero who was Spartacus's adversary in the Ludus, right? But that character very memorably gets killed in the final season, beheaded, right? And so they're making a show with him, and we're like, well, how are they going to do that? He's dead, right? Because it's supposed to take place after the Spartacus rebellion, but he's like now running the gladiator school, the Ludus. It's like, what? Yeah. He's dead. And now today they announced that Lucy Lawless, who was in the first couple of seasons as the wife of the head of the Ludus, right? Brilliant. The guy John Hanno played the head of Ludus.
Lucretia, I think
brilliant.
she played.
Yeah, she played Lucretia, the wife, and she was like this sexually voracious Roman aristocratic woman who was a villain. And she was Lucy Lawless. It's Xena, and she's incredible in this, and it's very sexy. Yeah. But she died at the end of season 2. And you're like, in a very memorable way. And she doesn't show up to the other seasons because she's dead. So how are these? And so what they're doing is they're doing an alternative universe. They're essentially doing a parallel universe where these characters didn't die. And what kind of bizarro way into that is that?
That's bullshit.
God.
That's
Oh
called
my God.
bullshit. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure
I'm still going to watch it.
Go for that.
I'll still watch it.
I'll still watch it because those characters are great. I think the idea is that they're gonna, like, because she was kind of like a witch or something in the show. So I think the idea is maybe they're going to show that through her witchcraft, she opened a portal to an alternative Rome history. Where, I don't know, where she's the one that creates the alternative reality. When she died, she actually was born in this world. I don't know, but I'll watch it because of her.
So in the chat, we got people who have a definite opinion about this, whether they should bring this show back. And so here's the thing where I will say, this is a weird way to do it, but it never really got a fair run because of the health of Andy Whitfield, and they had to go back and do a prequel season, which was also good. Gods of the Arena, I like that too. That was great stuff.
Yeah. It was a good show.
But then they tried to move forward, and then he unfortunately got worse again and passed away, and that really hurt the show. Yeah. They replaced him with a guy who tried his best but was nowhere near the same actor, especially physically. He didn't embody the role like Andy had, and so they pushed forward and they featured other characters a bit more. I think for that reason, they got more Crixus, which I didn't have an issue with, but. They didn't get to do the show they wanted to. Like, they had to adjust so many different places and stall for time. And so I guess this is a way to do it. Honk is deserved for that, probably. Yeah, I take it. Yeah.
I mean, how else you do it? Because those were the most memorable characters in the show, right?
Right.
So they're the ones everyone loved. They loved the villain, right? They loved Ashur. They loved her as Lucretia. Personally, I would love that there was a hot blonde who was like the married to a woman. Remember the Roman soldier, and then she like bangs Spartacus, and then she gets pregnant by Spartacus, even though she's like his enemy. And it's like, I mean, I want the hot, bring her back, man.
Yeah, no shit.
She was great.
And I think they tricked her with that because she didn't know it was him. He had a mask on, but he knew it was him the first time.
Yeah, I mean, because they had like a eyes wide shut sex party. The gladiators were forced to bang these chicks, right? And and again, that's Lucretia's idea because she wants to corrupt this innocent, noble woman, and she wants to get her like banging, sort of like Emmeline Snively with Marilyn Monroe, like let's corrupt this sweet girl, whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tacky way to go about it, but if it's good, I'm still going to watch it because I love that kind of stuff. I didn't like the first season at first either. And then I went back and watched it later, and I got pulled right into it because too much fake blood. Like it wanted to be 300 there for a while.
They tried it for like the first couple of episodes. They tried doing that visual, and then they said it's too expensive. Let's just have them running around like in normal camera.
And the other one you were talking this. So on his Patreon, which is pinned, it should be pinned.
Yeah, it's actually worth your $5. It's a really entertaining Patreon.
It really is.
I think.
And if you look at it, like he has multiple stuff every day, and at least one of the things one of his stories will interest you. And so like that's an off sort of like no one else is talking about redoing Spartacus, but Cameron. So I'm pumped about that. And then also the Gina stuff where
Yeah, so those heard about it. So the judge today, she's got her lawsuit for wrongful termination, and Disney attempted to dismiss it, saying that it was within their freedom of speech rights to basically deny someone else freedom of speech because they didn't want to be associated with her speech, blah blah blah. And the judge said that doesn't make sense based on precedent. That's not how the law works, And so they basically, the judge is a woman, female judge, who said this is your claim doesn't work with how the law works with regard to what an employee can say, because you're not a company, even though your company is based on free speech, you are not a company that's based on association. That was the idea that their claim was that our company's reputation as Disney will be damaged because Gina was claimed.
Yeah, right.
But again, that's the lawyer's claim that Gina was an anti-Semite, as was claimed, and that hurts our reputation. And she's like, well, that would work if you were a nonprofit organization, like if you were APAC or if you were the ADL and you had an employee that was making comments that were deemed by others as anti-Semitic. Well, that affects your association as a nonprofit and the public persona of the ideology that your organization represents. However, a media organization like Disney does not have an ideology that it represents. It represents entertainment, right? So you can't claim that as your defense. And so they're going forward with a suit, and we'll see what happens. I have reported on my Patreon that Jon Favreau, again, my sources inside of Disney and Lucasfilm, that Jon Favreau has been pushing for months to try to get this resolved. He wants Gina back. He wants her on the movie. The new. He wants her back as Cara Dune, and my sources actually saw. And again, who knows what's happened to it? But about 2 months ago, my sources inside of Lucasfilm saw a newly rewritten draft of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which had Cara Dune reintroduced as a character. And they saw that draft. It's one of several drafts that are floating around the office, but they're like, we'd never seen this before. So for some reason, Favreau put her back in. Maybe he had been having conversations that a settlement was near and it didn't happen, but he put her back in, or at least prepared for the possibility of her returning in one draft. So my instinct is right now that I will see. I think that the smartest thing for Mr. Iger to do is to settle this now and give Gina what she wants. I'm having a bit of an argument with some of my colleagues on Patreon. Some people saying Gina doesn't want to come back. Well, that's her lawsuit says she wants to come back. Her lawsuit said, give me my job back. So that's what the lawsuit says she wants. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going with what she says she wants in the lawsuit. If she wins the lawsuit, she gets her job back. That's what the lawsuit's demand for remedy is, right? And so I think she does want to come back. I think this was her favorite role in her burgeoning acting career. Losing that role derailed her career. She's been doing independent films since then. She hasn't got back into Hollywood, really. And I think coming back as in a Star Wars movie as Cara Dune with her toys is going to help her professionally. Salty. So I do think she probably wants to.
Salty's got to go. He's got to go right now.
Okay.
My name is Salty Traveling Sea. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. No, it's just, hey, I don't know why you made me big screen. Thanks for having me on, Zach. Thanks to everybody in chat. Cameron, it was really great.
What a pleasure. Thank you. Do get this book, Salty. Get this book, because he has what he claims is what actually happened that night from Lawford's own mouth.
Okay.
And it's really interesting.
Okay. No, it was great working with you. And I love talking about this woo-woo stuff. And I would love sometime to dig into the CIA stuff, like this stuff that from the Freedom of Information Act, multiple documents outlining things that were said days before she offed herself and why she needed to be gotten rid of. So thanks for having me on. Everybody in chat, have a great night, gentlemen.
Thanks, Salty.
Take care.
Peace.
Bye.
Monthly streams now, Salty. You want to do these?
Are we just going to keep this video? I'm happy with this video. We can just keep doing this for the next hour or whatever. So.
Talking about your which is, and people who are here from there agree. It is the best Patreon out there. And I've quit every other Patreon I've ever had, but not this one.
Well, thank you. Well, that's because I try to put out at least something once a day to the best. I mean, I'm a member of a couple of Patreons as well. And like, I'll get an update once a month. I'm like, dude, I'm giving you money. You're giving me an update once a month?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
But you do more than that. You go above and beyond, and you're easy to get a hold of too, and you're always willing to share ideas, and you respond to everyone all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a session today with one of the Patreon members. They paid me to get discounted rates with screenwriting consulting, and so they gave me a draft of their horror script. It's a second draft they've had me consult on, and it's really good shape now. It's almost there, like it's a movie that can get made, and so it's really delightful to watch, like a Patreon member consulting with me and it's getting their craft to a place they might become a professional screenwriter.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely worth it. So I'm still a member there, and I still enjoy it. And there's always you pull stuff that's interesting for me. I don't know how you know it's going to be, but it is, and you always have your own take on it. It's not you're not just spitting out.
Yeah, no,
someone else's
I would
story.
say what I believe. It's often not in correlation with what other people on YouTube are saying. So if you want a perspective from the industry that doesn't match what everyone else is saying, then come hear something else. And I tend to have a tendency to be right. Not always, but I tend a large tendency to be right.
Gooch,
Yes, sir.
what's going on with you?
Just this YouTube thing. Just having fun on there. Just building a small little channel here and having
army?
fun with it.
You're building an army, dude. 1,000 people yesterday.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah,
No big deal.
time. Yeah.
I wanted to share something before we go because I had my own paranormal experience, or what could be.
Oh, okay.
And maybe you guys can help me walk through this because I was surprised that it went this way. And I was in the Azores, San Miguel Island, and
You were on the Azores? Okay, wow, okay.
yeah, was there for 10 days. My wife's family is from there, and so we went back there for that reason.
Sure, you're an Atlantean.
Unbelievable.
I believe the Azores are the mountaintops of Atlantis, but go on.
Okay, here's the funny story. I told my wife that. I said, "Did you know that people say the Azores could be Atlantis?"
Yeah.
And she said, "No, Mark and Joe were just there. It's in the Bahamas."
Well,
because there's a resort called Atlantis.
okay,
She didn't know about the real Atlantis.
I'm sorry.
And it was like, oh God, no. How did you? Yeah. Anyways, it's kind of funny for me. For me, it was funny. So I was last year we were leaving, and everything there. Let's see if I can grab a visual maybe. But all of the sidewalks they're all cobblestone. They're all decorated, and they're so narrow that if you walk out of your house, you're gonna get hit by a car some days. Like there's nothing.
It was built for horses, basically.
Yeah, and there's still horses in towns, and there's still cows in towns, and people use horses, and people use vehicles. It's a great place. It's absolutely gorgeous. So definitely go there. But this is our last day. We're leaving our Airbnb, walking past an old school that the school had been shut down. They built a new one behind it, but they're still using this school for daycare at this time of the year. And the windows are open, and we're walking past it, and like. I asked my son, who's 8, and he has autism, if he wants to go play there because there's a playground right there, and he won't go. He refused to go on that playground. The whole time we were there for 10 days, he wouldn't go, and would want to get away from there. So, anyways, we're walking away from that past the school, and I think I hear a water balloon, and I could be kids screwing around in the top windows of the school are open, and it's like a sploosh, and there's nothing behind me. Okay. And so
you heard the splash.
I heard the splash. I heard the sort of that sound that they make in the air too a little bit. That's why I thought it was an water balloon, and it was. They just missed me, but there was nothing there, and there was no one in the windows either that were open. So we kept walking, and I got this feeling that there was someone behind us who wanted to pass us, which is a common thing there because you can't pass someone unless you move for them, because the streets there are that narrow.
Yeah, I get it.
But so we're walking, and I look, and there's nobody behind me, and I'm walking along. I'm carrying my water bottle in my left hand, and it's like somebody came and knocked it, like it got moved forward.
Okay.
It's not the wind, and I didn't drop it, but I could have dropped it because I was kind of holding it loose. And then my son, who is at the front always leading us, he comes all the way back to where I am, and he's looking behind me, and he's distressed. Okay. That there's something behind me, and
he can see something.
He definitely sees something, and he doesn't do this, and he's just staring behind me as we're walking, and there's still nothing there, and he grabs me by the wrist, which is something that I usually do for him if it's a dangerous situation. I don't want to bank on holding hands, so I'll hold his wrist, and so he grabs me by the wrist, and he pulls me across the street. To go walk on the other side of the street on the sidewalk. Okay. And so everyone else has to come over, and then we keep walking. And his eyes were like this big. It was crazy. And he's watching as we're crossing. And I saw nothing, but I mean, he never does that. He's never, he would always leave from the front. So if he wanted to go somewhere, he would go to the front and go, let's go this way. He would never silently come back, grab my wrist, and pull me across the street.
And you said he's autistic, so he has some communication challenges.
Oh yeah, he can speak. He can speak and all that. He just doesn't. He doesn't speak. His sentences are a bit choppy, and he's aware. So yeah.
Well, look, I mean, but often what you would say, quote unquote, autistic children. My niece is very heavily autistic, and she's also, I've known since she was a toddler that she could see spirits. I could see it. I could see her interacting with things that were not there. I could see her talking to my grandparents who had passed away using their names. She had never heard their names, and she would be talking to them in the corner, like talking to them directly. And so later on in life, I confronted her about this because she was having difficulty sleeping. She was a teenager, and she was like in really bad shape. She couldn't sleep for night upon night, and she wouldn't, nothing was helping her, and she couldn't go to school because of insomnia. And I went to her because my sister didn't know what to do, and I said to her, "Let just you and me talk," because I knew what was up. And I said to her, "Just you and me talk now." She was like 15 or something. I said, "You see spirits, don't you? It's like the sixth sense, or you see ghosts, or you see spirits, don't you? And that's why you can't sleep, is that you can see them, right?" And she said, "Yes, but please don't tell mommy. Mommy won't be able to deal with it." And so that was a very important revelation moment where, it was very, and then I did tell mommy because mommy had to deal with it. Right. And we actually were able to take her, amazing enough, to a Sufi spiritual teacher, Sufi master that was nearby, who actually did not an exorcism, but sort of an energy cleansing to help her close some of the open energy portals that were allowing her to see all the stuff. Some of the stuff was very scary, it was negative stuff. Right. And it closed it, and she immediately changed. Like she's like, "Oh, I can't see them anymore." And he's like, "Look, when she's old enough, we can do a reverse energy healing that she can, if she wants to access this ability, she can. But as a child, it's too much for her and it's too frightening. And so let's close it out for her sanity." And it did. So autistic children they're literally on a different electronic spectrum, like of electromagnetic brainwave spectrum. And so some of them can see things.
Got a photo. So I have a photo of the street that I'll show here.
Please.
So I wanted to bring it up tonight. So it's that narrow, right?
Right, I get it. I've been to Spain. A lot of streets are like that in Granada and Andalusia. A lot of streets are like that. They're made for carts and horses, one way.
And this is actually the fence and the wall from the school. So this was a different day, but it's the same area. And I was walking at the back, and kind of like where the water ball was with me. Somebody smacked it. Like, it wasn't the wind. It was. So it felt like I was being pranked.
It felt a little bit like teasing rather than aggressive.
Yes. It felt like someone throws a water balloon. That's kind of funny, right? I would have done that too when I was a kid. See us walking away, I'll throw one for sure. And so it didn't seem malicious. It was just like something just messing with me a little bit, maybe because we were leaving.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, prankster is better than other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, definitely it is. So I just wanted to share that and see what you thought of it, because it doesn't happen to me quite that much.
Well, did you ever talk to your son about what he experienced, or did he not want to talk about it?
He can't. Like, he can talk to you about things he can do or wants to go and do, but it's too abstract.
I understand.
So he can't.
So that's fine. That's fine. And maybe it's for the best, but I mean, look, I do look.
He was sure though.
Again, like I said, I'm sure he's able to see into the other world. And because maybe he's not able to communicate about it, it's going to have to remain something private until he's in a place in life where he can communicate about it. But like, my niece didn't say anything for years, right? And so, look, I don't doubt that experience happened to you. I don't doubt it was real, right? Because your intuition knows when something is wrong. Your intuition knows when something is off. It's like when I think I've mentioned before, the only time I've ever seen a UFO in my life that I knew as a UFO was in 2019 in the Atacama Desert of Chile, where I saw something in the sky of the desert right after the solar eclipse. And I instantly knew because my body reacted to it. My body went into flight or fight mode, right? And it's just a light in the sky, but my body began to tremble that it would not have that reaction on a drone or a satellite or an airplane or anything else. It had an immediate visceral reaction of, this is not right and this could be unsafe, right? Just seeing this light above me said, this is not supposed to be happening in our reality. And I was with two other people. One of them was a pilot, and he said, that's nothing like I've ever seen. He's a professional pilot. He's like, not an airplane, not a drone. That's making no sound. And we both had this sense of wonder, but the initial body reaction told me it was real, and that body will tell me everything, right? So you had a visceral reaction that something was off when that happened. Your body was telling you.
Yeah, and this is the school, so you can see it's older, and the windows at the top are open because it was so hot. And the new school was built behind it, just not being used yet. And that playground you would not go to.
Okay. So there's a history there. Do you know the history of the school at all? Like, did any children die there?
I mean, it's an old school, so but I don't know.
Was it ever an orphanage kind of thing? Do you know that?
I don't. It's really hard to find stuff out there. I did try to look into that and then to these other places we saw, and it's like there's not much out there for information on that. And I asked people who live there about the school, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's the old school. This is the new school." Is kind of all they could tell me.
Yeah.
And it's everything. Everyone there is Catholic, so it's all Catholic, and everyone there has a lot of faith, and so you'd expect to be able to have that conversation, and really I didn't get to.
Well, I mean, but Catholic, as you know, Catholic is a mystical tradition, right? It's more of that. I think those who are Catholic in the audience, like my friend Stephanie Janicek, I think she's not here anymore. She might not be, but those who are Catholic will know that it is inherently mystical tradition. Whereas I think Protestantism is more of an intellectual approach to the religion. Just a simple thing is I was today giving feedback on some scenes of my mentee Patreon member's script, and it dealt with the Christian sacrament, right? With and for the Catholics, it's real transubstantiation. It's the bread, the wafer is turned into the actual body of Christ, and the wine is turned into the actual blood of Christ. And most Protestants would say that that's symbolic, that it's not an actual metaphysical, like energetic change. That's a different approach to Protestant Catholicism. Catholicism is inherently more mystical, so they are more open, I think. Especially Catholicism tends to absorb other traditions, like in Mexico, Latin America, it'll absorb the Mayan and Inca traditions, and goddesses will become saints. Like Guadalupe, like the Virgin of Guadalupe, right? She was parallel to to an ancient Aztec goddess. So you could convince the Aztecs to stop fighting the conquistadores. They were going to lose. They're going to be completely genocided, right? And then this entity appears who the Aztec people believed to be, their traditional goddess, but it was presented to them as the Virgin Mary, and that allowed them then to transition into the Catholic tradition, which was going to win because these guys were just going to kill them all unless they won, right? And so it allowed the survival of those people, and their spiritual traditions were then absorbed into Catholicism and made that mysticism enters Catholicism.
Yeah, it's an older building, so it's over 100 years old. I don't know when it says 1922 on it, but I don't know if I don't have context for that, so it may not be from them, but that's what it says on the school. And it's been fixed up a few times, and now they've decided to just do a new one.
Dude, maybe you should look into the history if you can find out the history of it. I mean, everything's available on the internet. Look how much research I've done on Marilyn Monroe and Jim, Norma Jean and Jim. Look at the random stuff I found. I found pictures that she took, like you saw the picture I took. I found a picture that she took of him on the beach in 1943. I mean, who the hell did I found that? But it's all available if you look hard enough, right? It's all there somewhere.
I tried to research quite a few buildings out there that I thought were really interesting, and were obviously had been abandoned for a while, but there's no reason or rhyme for that, like why they had been abandoned, and they're not for sale. And one of them owned like a whole city block. It seemed like one big house, but the other buildings next to it were very short, and behind it was all these open courtyards. Like, I don't know what it was, and I asked people and they couldn't tell me, or didn't want to tell me. Anyway,
well, they don't want to tell you. There's a reason for it. There's a past there. I mean, there's something that happened there.
One said it was owned by the university, but the university said it didn't own it.
All right, so if people aren't giving you the proper information, it's because something happened there. Like there's probably some kind of scary past that's been suppressed by the local community because it's too traumatic.
Yeah, well, that's what I would think.
Well, thanks for humoring me on that story.
No, it's not humoring. I mean, I've just shared with you what psychic told me about Marilyn Monroe, and people can believe or not believe. What's interesting is what I shared parallels what we now can know historically. And I know for a fact my friend didn't know any of these facts, right? And she found facts that went against the official narrative that only Jim said were true and nobody believes him. And she's like, no, that's what really did happen, but historians won't believe him.
Right. Well, I think the fact that you were using multiple psychics is even more interesting.
Yeah,
because you get different results.
Well, so actually, I'm sorry that he left, because I didn't get into it. I had a second psychic who actually described her death scene. Described what happened, and I'll share that maybe when he comes back in, or you can share it with him afterwards. Hopefully, he'll watch tell him to watch the the replay at the end, so at this mark, right?
Yep.
And so, but yeah, so this my second psychic friend was Heather. Heather is a very effective psychic, and she's done amazing work in front of me and helped me out a lot of things. And we were doing just a general sort of psychic reading, and thank you, Devil Emma. Sorry. And then we did a psychic reading generally, and suddenly, like again, the way Jim came to my friend, Cindy, Norma Jean comes into the picture. She's like, "Oh, wait, what's happening?" And she said Norma, and she called her Norma Jean. She said, first of all, she said it's who she really is, Norma Jean. She said Marilyn was a persona, was an alternate persona, and she says Marilyn, when she died, the Marilyn persona disintegrated because it wasn't real. Right. And so it doesn't go on to the afterlife. The core self went to the afterlife. And so Norma Jean is there, like free of the Marilyn persona. She understands it, but she's no longer controlled by it. Right. It's not something there. And so she said, so Norma Jean, so we had a session where she said all kinds of things. But then the interesting thing is she told me, and I believe it. Fundamentally, I believe it. I actually used the scenes in my script. Right. But that Norma Jean, that she says she doesn't have a full memory of what happened to her at death because she had been drugged, but this is what she can remember, which is she had been drugged, and apparently probably by Bobby Kennedy. He came by, and appears roofied her and knocked her out, and then she woke up. What happened? Because she's so tolerant to drugs, right? That a roofie that's meant to knock her out for 24 hours works for like 2 hours, right? She wakes up, right? And what happens is she says she woke up, she'd been drugged, she woke up, she's stumbling around her house, and she suddenly sees 3 men there. She calls them the Men in Black because she's still drugged. She's been knocked out. She's drugged. She's very disoriented. She can't see their faces. They've got the lights off. They're looking through her house for stuff, right? Apparently for evidence of her connection to the Kennedys, right? And so, and then, she can't see their faces in the shadows, but then they're like, oh shit, when she's awake and they can see her, they're like, fuck. Because the whole point of knocking her out was to do the investigation of the house, find her diary, which was never rediscovered. This guy claims that her diary was taken by the LAPD, and he read part of it, and he has excerpts from it in here. It's very interesting. I believe it. But, her diary was not recovered. That was what they were supposedly looking for, the diary that proved her connection to Robert Kennedy and JFK. And so they're looking for any connection she has to JFK that she could, because she had been threatening to do a press conference on Monday. So she's dead on Saturday night, and she's threatening on Monday she was going to do a press conference claiming that she was going to blow she wasn't going to do that, but she was going to blow the lid open, and, she was being histrionic because of her disorder. And so they took that very seriously, said, well, we're not going to let the president of the United States go down because of this slut, right? And so they sent goons to take care of it. But the idea was to knock her out and go to the house, find any evidence that she could actually present, and then eliminate that evidence. And it wasn't to kill her. And then she woke up. And they thought she could identify them. And like, shit, right? They're like, shit, she sees us going through the house. She could identify them. Fuck. And then they're like, all right, well, we have to go to plan B, which is we got to make it permanent, right? And so she says that she remembers they grabbed her physically, and they're like, well, and she's screaming for help, but there's no one in the house because the housekeeper has been paid off to leave, right? There's nobody there. She's screaming for help, and they're grabbing her and they're taking her into the bedroom and they're ripping off her clothes because they're like, all right, plan B time, we're gonna finish this, right? And then she tells me she disassociates because this is something that she would do. She's like, no. Yep. She's like, she knows she's gonna die. She knows this is it, right? Yep. She ain't getting out of this. She knows they're gonna kill her, and so she disassociates. So she like goes out of her body, and it's like, well, that's happening to Marilyn. It's not happening to me, right? And so, and this is something we know, but it's believable because again, Jim said that even when he was married to her, she had disassociation problems. Like she would sit at the dinner table and she'd be talking, and she would stop and she would just stare straight ahead, like in another world for like a minute, and like not acknowledge anybody. And then she would just come back, and as if nothing had happened, she would leave her body. And that was when he was worried for her mental health. He said disassociation was always a problem for her. She learned that during the traumatic child abuse.
Yeah, it's a reaction to trauma for sure.
Yeah, she's like, she's being abused by some guy. She's like, I'm out of my body. It's not happening to me. It's happening to her. It's not happening to me, right? That's right. She disassociates. She's like, oh, I'm out. She said she went out of her body and was like, just watched this happen to somebody else. And then she actually, Heather claimed that she then, realizing she was going to die, she kind of regretted all the choices she had made. And she then, her safety and her disassociation was she went into a dream world as they were basically injecting her to kill her, right? She went into a dream world, a fantasy world, to escape the situation, where she imagined this alternative life that I described, where she stayed with Jim, she had a child, she basically became like a high school teacher who did some acting on the side and didn't become famous, but lived to like 80 years old. And had a nice family. And so so the tragedy is her last thoughts, according to Heather, were actually of Jim. She's like, I wish I had lived with Jim. I wish I hadn't left my normal life for this, because it ends this way. And that's not what I wanted, right? So it's heartbreaking, but I kind of believe that. It feels true to me that that's how she would have reacted in a scenario like that, because when you know you're going to die, you look at your life and go, your life flashes before your eyes. And in her case, I think she probably thought, if I just made one different choice, if I had said to Jim, no, let's stay together and let's work this out, I wouldn't be murdered right now.
And she's only 36. She was
36.
36. Yeah. All that before 36.
Yeah. So
well, I think that like Lovett had mentioned it earlier, but it's interesting to think about how the world would have been different if she just stayed home with Jim.
Yeah. And it's interesting because remember we talked about the Strasbergs. We mentioned them. They're the actor like Svengali who took all her money, right? Yeah. So one of the daughter of that guy, Lee Strasberg, his daughter Susan Strasberg, was like her roommate when she was living with them, right? Mm-hmm. And so she was like a teenager when this was an older woman. She's like an older sister, and so she wrote a book afterwards about her life, because everybody wrote a book, right? She wrote a book, and then she actually did an interview on Sally Jesse Raphael. Remember Sally Jesse Raphael?
I do. The glasses.
Yeah. So Sally Jesse Raphael in like the 2000s or like the 1990s did an interview, like a on-stage interview with Jim Dougherty.
Okay.
Jane Russell, who starred with her in
and he went to school with her, I think, right?
He went to school with her.
Yeah.
They were friends. He used to do high school plays with Jane. So they were childhood friends. And so Jane had Jane Russell on there, who's still elegant in her 80s or whatever. And then you had this Strasberg and her brother, her younger, and this Strasberg chick I really disliked. I mean, I've taken classes at the Strasberg school, so I know the institution, but she would kept interrupting. Like every time Jim and Jane would share their experiences with Norma Jean before she's Marilyn, because Jane went to high school with her, right? Yeah. So it's like they would share their experiences and they would contradict the official narrative. She would interrupt it because she's got to keep the narrative that her father bought into going. And so at one point, one of the audience members said, Jim, I feel so bad for you. Maybe she should have just stayed with you. If she just stayed with you and worked it out, maybe she wouldn't have died. And Jim is like responding to that. Yeah, I think that's what I believe. I think she should have stayed with me and she would have died at 36. Right. Right. And Susan interrupted him because she didn't like that. This is what the audacity. This is her husband. This is her husband who lost her, right? You're just some chick she spent like a couple of years as a roommate with, right? What the fuck, right? But she interrupts him and she basically shuts him down and says, no, had she stayed, like she would have had a breakdown, an emotional breakdown in her marriage, and she would have been schizophrenic and gone to the hospital. It's like, guess what? She was schizophrenic and went to the hospital as Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. I mean, so how would that have been worse? Let's say she had a breakdown, he would have been taking care of her. I have family members who are schizophrenic. The only reason they got through it is because their loving spouse got them through it. Took them to the doctor, got them medicine, stayed with them for years while they were recuperating from the schizophrenia, right? That's what he would have done. But this stupid Strasberg woman is like, she's shutting him down. It's like, no, she did the right thing. Had she done the right thing, she would have died with you as in boredom, like she said. What a hurtful thing to say on stage in front of national television. But that's who the Strasbergs were. This was their girl. This was their girl, their little girl they controlled. They couldn't let him say that maybe Hollywood fucked her up.
Yeah, true. We gotta get. So I missed this one earlier, Josh. So if you're still here, I will play your clip in it. And if not, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And you have one guy who's loyal, trustworthy, considerate, not toxic, and supports me. Same woman complains that what they want is boring. Yeah.
And our ladies are not here to. So let's get to the guys' perspective on this. I got all the ladies' perspectives, and their perspectives are fair because that's how Marilyn probably thought, how Norma Jean thought. But as a guy, I think this guy got a raw deal. I'm Team Jim. He got a raw deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He did.
Yeah, he didn't. It wasn't fair to him. He was a good guy. No. He didn't deserve it. He didn't. I mean, when people start arguing with you about Jim, like fans will say, he just used her for sex. She was 16 and he was 21.
Come on.
But I was like, oh, you don't think Joe DiMaggio was using her for sex? You don't think Arthur Miller, who's a loser and a geek, who's never, who can't get laid at all, is using her for sex? He
married her.
He said she was a teenage sexual fantasy for him. Miller said it.
Come on.
He says how disgusting that is, right? He said that, right? She was like a teenage sexual fantasy that he would jerk off to, and now he's banging her. He would say these things. He didn't. Jim didn't say.
Arthur Miller said that?
He said that. He said she was the kind of girl I would jerk off to as a teenager. He said that. It's a disgusting thing to say about your dead wife. He's a disgusting guy, right? They were
in context, it's even worse. Yeah,
DiMaggio and him were disgusting. They were bad guys. But Jim never said that. Jim wouldn't talk about their sex life. He's like, that's private. What the fuck's wrong with you, right? And so it's like, but it's just like Jim got screwed here because what's his great sin? He's a normal guy. And and so I said to the fans who were like, he used her, he was like, he was Bengaling her because she was a young girl. I was like, you know what? All right, let's go with that. So he's been told by his mom, that girl you're sweet on next door, she's gonna be sent back to the orphanage. But maybe if you married her, she'd be a good wife for you and good daughter-in-law for us, and you can save her from the orphanage. What if he had said no? What if, because he was a handsome guy, he was dating he was dating Jane Russell. Was
he really?
He had dated Jane Russell when they were in high school. I mean, he had dated Jane Russell, one of the hottest.
He's a stud.
He was a stud. He's a handsome guy. I mean, he's a stud. And his previous girlfriend that Norma Jean was very jealous about, was like a California beauty pageant winner. He was with beautiful women, and she was older than him. She was a sophisticated beauty pageant winner. That's who he was. That was his girlfriend before Norma, right? And so she was jealous of that. So he's like, well, no, I got this hot beauty pageant queen. I'll just stay with her, right? What would have happened to me?
Type, yeah,
you had a type. Beautiful women. You had a type.
Yeah. It's a good type.
It's a good type, right? And they liked it too, right? I mean, he's a good-looking guy. So, but it's what would have happened to Norma Jean had he said no? I'm not going to marry her. She would have been sent back to the orphanage. She would have slit her wrist, or she would have ended up working as an actual streetwalker. Yeah. She became a prostitute inside the Hollywood system. She would have been on Sunset, but she would have run away. She ran away when she was 10 years old from the orphanage, and they caught her. You think at 16 she ain't going to run away? No, she's going to run away. She's going to run away, and she's going to end up working as a streetwalker on Sunset Boulevard, and would have been dead at 36 from that. Right? He saved her, and it's like, well, he's Captain Save-A-Ho. I mean, it's like, do you really think that was the better outcome for Norma Jean? He's like, no, I don't want you, baby. I got all these hot women. I don't need you. Obviously, he loved this girl, and he didn't deserve what happened.
He wouldn't have been there for as long as he was if he didn't. And welcome, Lieutenant Crittenden. I don't think I've seen you here before.
Welcome.
Gives a new twist to these saying power corrupts, I guess. Yeah. So we've been going for 2.5 hours, so I'm going to wrap.
We should probably wind down. Yeah.
Yes.
So we didn't do one other thing, though. Maybe we can do next month. And maybe we can bring others, a new group, maybe like Lady and others, to talk about. We didn't do the astrological analysis because I did a zodiac analysis of their relationship, which matches what we've been talking about. It's amazing. It's almost like this was destined to happen to them this way. So maybe next month we can do that.
Let's do that. I saw the chart you have, so that's
and so you can, and I've really detailed it because I've got a chart of her, I've got a chart of him, and I've got a chart of their relationship itself. And it's like you can look into it and go, this is exactly what's going to happen to them. It shocks you.
Definitely next time then. Next month we'll do this again.
All right.
These are awesome. I love this. I love these.
Well, we had a good group of people watching, and I think there's a lot of people going to watch afterwards. I think it's a fun episode. Yeah,
it's been. And everyone comes to watch Cameron, so it's true. It makes my night a breeze. I gotta say. Yeah. So Cameron, what's next for you aside from any other shows? You're working like your Patreon?
I mean, what I need the prayers and the good wishes of people in the audience. So I've got this new script called Goodbye Norma Jean, which is that story of Jim and Norma. I mean, their story of their marriage, and so. I love that. Thank you. So any of you who have positive thoughts, send me good because God willing, when put out in the marketplace in the near future, I have very strong hope that this movie is going to get made. God willing, because Marilyn Monroe is special. There's been a lot of movies made about Hollywood. I got a really wonderful message today from a very famous screenwriter who's a friend of mine, very successful. She just did a huge movie with I'm blanking on with Anne Hathaway. She just did a huge movie with Anne Hathaway. She wrote a movie for Anne Hathaway, and that's she's a very big writer and writes a lot of women's movies. And so I gave her the script, sort of like, can you look at this, because she's somebody I admire. Like I wish I had a career like her. She's very successful, and she got back to me today with this lengthy, incredible analysis of my script, saying she absolutely loved it, and scene by scene she went through it. And this is a highly this is a woman I admire who's also blunt, who'll tell you it's not working. And she said, God willing, you're actually going to make this one because I can see the market for it. So those who are watching, please just send me prayers and positive thoughts. If you don't like me, just hold back on the negative thoughts. Hold the evil eye. Go send the evil eye to something else. Because if people don't like me and they're, just don't send me. There are people that don't like me. If people don't like me on YouTube in particular, just ignore. Don't waste your time with the evil eye. Just go be happy, positive. Those who like me, send me some good thoughts.
Fair. That is a fair ask. And you met Bruce Lee's daughter too.
Yeah, I mean, she was Bruce Lee. Shannon Lee came to LA yesterday or 2 days ago, to do a book signing of her. She's published several books based on her father's, archives of letters and things. She has a new one out, which is really looking into a lot of his philosophy that has not been published yet. Because they still have boxes and boxes of Bruce's stuff from that when he died overnight. They didn't expect it. They had to pack up all their stuff. They were in Hong Kong. And they packed up everything and moved back to like San Francisco or whatever. And so they still, 40 years later, have all these unpacked boxes of Bruce's stuff that they're still going through, right? So this is a new book of a lot of his recent documents and letters that he wrote that were not known historically. And there's still many more boxes to be uncovered. So that was me meeting her. She's doing book signing. I talked to her because I shared this incident that happened where it's a true story. I shared it with her directly, which is that a few years ago, I was invited to do a pitch. I won't say which studio it was, but one of the big movie studios was claiming they wanted to do a movie with Will Smith, and they wanted to do a movie with resurrecting Bruce Lee using face technology, right? AI and facial reconstruction technology, and they would recreate him. And they wanted to do a movie with Will Smith, and I was like, "Wow, that's a crazy idea." Sure. But I came up with a pitch for how to do the movie based on. Bruce was he was into Taoism, very mystical, very philosophical. Like, what is the mythology of how you could resurrect Bruce Lee using his own myth, right? And bring him back to the world. Because the idea of the myth is he's dead, but how do you bring him back to life so that he's an actual person in the movie with Bruce Lee? So I was like, I can tell you that. And I came up with a very spiritual take that was honoring his philosophy because it's very important to me. And I walk in and I pitch it, and the executive, I swear to God, the executive is like, he interrupts me about a minute into the pitch and says, "Nah, we don't want that. That's not what we're looking for." And he says, "We just want to do a buddy comedy. We just want some dumb jokes with Bruce Lee." I was like, I just stared at him. I said, "Are you out of your mind?" This guy looks. I mean, look how insulting that is. But they basically wanted to turn him into Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker.
People would riot.
They would riot, but he's too stupid to know that. I was like, do you understand that Bruce Lee is considered a spiritual figure? He's considered like a Jedi master. He's considered a sage worldwide. The people don't just look at him as a act. You think he's Kato from the Hornet in the 1960s? That's what you think he was? That's not how he's remembered, right? They wanted to do Kato. And I was like, you literally don't know his legacy? And I said, you're going to be laughed. You try to do this movie, you will have a rebellion amongst the fans, and your studio will be boycotted and you will be fired. I said that to his face. This is an executive who's used to having Will Smith kiss his ass. And I was like, you're going to be fired. Are you out of your mind? Are you going to actually try this? I said it like that. I was angry. And he turned red in the face. His assistant was freaking out. Like, no one has talked back to this guy in the course of his career because he's a powerful executive. I said, you're out of your mind. This is shameful. And he basically said, you can leave the office now. And I was essentially escorted off the studio lot, right? But I don't regret that.
Good, you shouldn't. That was ridiculous. Like
that is ridiculous. I'm irritated hearing that. Like that's like,
I mean, it's. I literally, my mouth dropped open. I just couldn't. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe someone would say something. But that also explains the mindset of why Hollywood is still deeply racist towards him. They resent him, right? And that's why Tarantino was otherwise a fine filmmaker. I think did a very ugly section with him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a good movie. It was really made him a joke, which was really insulting. And Shannon talked about how much that hurt her. Right? He didn't even call her family to give a.
Oh,
he didn't even
really?
ask. He didn't even reach. She didn't even know. And then she sees it in the movie. Her dad is disrespected like that. And I'm telling you, it goes back to the racism that Bruce felt when he was here. Why did he leave Hollywood? Because they wanted him to be a joke. And you know why they wanted to be a joke? Because he was a threat. He was a really handsome Asian guy that women were attracted to. He could kick people's ass. Chuck Norris looked up to him, right?
Confidence through the roof, that guy.
And
just pure confidence.
And he just exuded it. And this is the 1960s, and they're like, this guy is a Chinaman who should be laundering shirts.
he believed in never saying anything negative about yourself.
Yeah. And all of Hollywood, what happened to Norma Jean? All of Hollywood was degrading herself, and he wouldn't let himself be degraded. So when they degraded him, he said, I'm out. And he went to Hong Kong and became more famous in Hong Kong, right? And so they hate him for that. They hate him to this day that he did what Norma Jean was not able to do. He outsmarted the system. She mastered the system for a brief moment. Like she became famous by mastering it. She could never escape it. She couldn't escape it, and it killed her, right? He escaped it. That's why they hate him.
Goose, you're a big fan of Bruce Lee.
Massive fan of Bruce Lee.
Where does that go back to?
I grew up at the age of 3 boxing with my grandfather, and learning about Muhammad Ali, being involved in like self-defense and like martial arts and stuff like that. And then when I turned 5, I saw Bruce Lee on TV and just started watching him more and more. Like he was a big name. Just started watching him more and more, and his philosophies and everything in life I kind of just try to follow a bit. Like he's just him and Muhammad Ali were huge figures in my life still to this day. I just the way they portrayed themselves. Yeah, like it's just.
Well, Gooch, let me say this. Shannon talked about that. Shannon said that Muhammad Ali was Bruce's icon. That Bruce looked up to Muhammad Ali, and as far as she is aware, they never met, and that's a tragedy, right? And so here's something that you may be happy to know. I just met Shannon Lee once at a book signing. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't care. But I'm actually very close with Muhammad Ali's first daughter, his eldest daughter, Maryam Meme Ali. She's very close, like a sister to me. And so she had all these incredible stories. She's shown me really amazing things from her father's life. So he really was the man that the public image was. He was just this incredible man of integrity. And I know because his daughter is one of the most high integrity person I've ever met, and that comes from her father.
Yeah. I don't know what they fought for, what they went through. It just,
iconic.
It is iconic, and I think people need to look at those two and take a serious look at themselves in the mirror and kind of say, like, what the hell am I doing?
Look at this guy. He had an opinion on the war, and he lost his medals for it. He was ready to go to jail for it. He took it all to the Supreme Court, right? And then he loses his medals, and he gains them back with his fists.
Yeah,
he wins again. I mean, who's that guy? He takes it back. He wins it in the ring.
Yeah, there will never be another one.
No,
can't see it.
Yeah. So, all right, guys, I should start winding down. We went a little bit longer than I needed to get some stuff done before this, but we'll get done now. So thank you,
thank you, Cameron.
So let's, Zach, you and I stay in touch. So maybe, sometime in mid-August or so, mid to late August, we can maybe do part 2, and let's try to bring in some new ladies who haven't heard this story, and then they can get the astrological. Maybe if you ask some of your friends who have a zodiac interest, they think you can really discuss the zodiac chart stuff.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. That'd be awesome. Sounds good. I'm sold.
All right, guys. God bless everyone.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you. I'll talk to you all later. Everyone stick around, hit the like button, and subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
And Gooch, tomorrow night. What's up with you?
Demon Slayer.
Yeah. I'm 3 episodes in now. I'm slowly gaining on you.
Yeah.
So
it's a good series. It gets
really surprising.
Yes, it is. It gets really good.
It's I'm surprised by the self-narration stuff. It does drive me a bit crazy.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to stop, and does it ever stop?
No.
Okay.
But that's anime. Like that's every anime.
I know it is. But
inner monologues, yeah.
It's an outer monologue. They just narrate themselves. Left foot, then my right foot, then my left foot. We can see you're walking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, my kid loves it too, so we were talking about it last night.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna hang out.
Yes, sir.
Fuckers.
Absolutely.
You can't stop us.
Absolutely.
YouTube.
No, they can't.
Anything you want to promote besides
Diabolical Souls and everyone come out and hang out with us at the Friday.
Yeah, that's right. We'll bring you guys. Come drive up here, and we'll all go hang out, and have a beer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll do a meetup. Huh? Get you up here for a meetup. Why not? Hey, Clay, and yeah, with that, let's send the people home happy. All right, are you ready? Chat, you got to stand for this. Have a good night. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the chats and the memberships. You guys are awesome, and we're out.
Respect to the trans community. And fuck you, trans fools.
Trans people are my friends. Trans folks gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for where we're going in. Trans people are my friends. Trans folks gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for where we're going in. Transform, show your fucking mouth. I'll knock you out. I'll knock you out. Transform, show your fucking mouth. I'll knock you out. You better watch out. Trans people are my friends. Trans folks gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for where we're going in. Trans people are my friends. Trans folks gon' catch these hands. Trans people are my friends. So respect them for where we're going in. Trans people are my friends.